Chapter 2035. The Art of Dividing Metal and Transforming God. Why have I never heard of such a technique? Yun Yao and Luo Li both looked at Ji Tianqing in confusion. Ji Tianqing did not explain. He nodded slightly and said, "There's no time to lose. Yao Yao, let's begin." After saying that, he sat cross-legged on the bronze medal, closed his eyes, and began to cast the technique. His face was solemn. He made strange gestures with both hands and used all his strength to cast the secret technique. He released the bright light of the stars and poured it into the bow of the ship. The dazzling light of the stars contained a mysterious power. After entering the bronze metal, it trembled at a high frequency. The light of the stars seemed to have turned into thousands of silver lines. It broke down the incomparably tough divine metal and opened up a passage as thick as a bowl. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the silver light of the stars continued to extend downward. The passage as thick as a bowl also gradually extended toward the depths of the bow of the ship, approaching the divine pearl bit by bit. In the void, one could not feel the passage of time. It was unknown how much time had passed. Perhaps it was a day, perhaps it was 2 days. Ji Tianqing continued to cast the technique without stopping. His mental energy was greatly depleted. His face was pale, and beads of sweat seeped out of his body. His spirit was somewhat dispirited, and he was extremely tired. After all, he only had the strength of the tribulation realm, but he had to use the power of the stars to forcibly cast the divine technique. This was only an ordinary divine technique and did not have much lethality. But he had already created a miracle. No matter how talented or monstrous he was, he could not hold on for a long time. Fortunately, the passage as thick as the mouth of a bowl had already extended nearly 300 meters. It was very close to the divine pearl. This was already his limit. If he wanted to dig any deeper, he would not be able to do it at all. Yun Yao and Luo Li saw this scene clearly. Of course, they were shocked and full of horror. Both of them found it hard to believe that Ji Tianqing had opened up a passage in the mysterious metal that even the reverse water divine sword could not break. What kind of amazing technique was this? Perhaps only a martial god could do this. Yun Yao was naturally overjoyed and proud of Ji Tianqing. On the other hand, Luo Li's expression was extremely complicated. She was both shocked and ashamed in her heart. But more than that, they were curious about Ji Tianqing. She really couldn't understand what kind of background Ji Tianqing had. What kind of identity and methods did he have to create miracles time and time again? At the same time, Ji Tianqing sent a voice transmission to Yun Yao, who was next to him. "Yao Yao, quickly communicate with the divine pearl and move it into the tunnel." Yun Yao had been waiting for a long time and was fully prepared. Hearing Ji Tianqing's voice transmission, she quickly closed her eyes and released her spiritual consciousness into the passage. Her soul consciousness followed the 100 deep tunnel and entered the depths of the ship without any hindrance. When his divine sense reached the bottom of the tunnel, it was only 3 meters away from the divine pearl. However, it was this thick piece of divine metal that stood in the middle that made her feel pressured and difficult. The material of the divine metal was special. Not only was it abnormally strong, it could also block magic power and isolate divine sense. Fortunately, her divine sense and the divine pearl could be said to be very close. She could clearly feel that every trace of the divine pearl's aura was as if it was alive and breathing. She was anxious and worried, but she forced herself to calm down. She focused her will to control her divine sense and merge it with the divine pearl's aura. A quarter of an hour, half an hour. Soon, an hour had passed. Yun Yao's divine sense finally communicated with the divine pearl successfully. They breathed together and shared a destiny. She was pleasantly surprised and excited. She quickly used her divine sense to guide the divine pearl to move forward slowly. It was a dark golden divine pearl. It was only the size of an egg and shone with a dazzling golden light. Its material was special. It could merge with the divine metal without any hindrance. It moved through the divine metal like a small fish swimming in the water. Yun Yao's divine sense was the thread that guided the small fish. The dark golden divine pearl moved bit by bit and got closer and closer to the tunnel. Ji Tianqing waited patiently. He gritted his teeth and held on tenaciously. Finally, Yun Yao controlled the divine pearl to pass through the thick divine metal and enter the tunnel. Without the obstruction of the divine metal, she immediately felt the pressure decrease greatly. Her connection with the divine pearl also became closer. Under the control of her mind, the divine pearl blossomed with a dazzling golden light and flew up along the bowl-sized passage. At the same time, Ji Tianqing also gradually retracted the starlight. The 1,000-feet-deep tunnel also began to close quickly from the bottom. Swoosh! After 100 breaths, the divine pearl passed through the 1,000-feet-deep tunnel and flew out of the divine metal. Yun Yao waved her sleeves and grabbed the divine pearl with her slender hand. She held it in her palm. Immediately after, Ji Tianqing also stopped casting and withdrew his magic power. The 1,000-feet-deep tunnel disappeared and returned to its original state. It was as if nothing had happened. His mind relaxed, and he let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly took out a pill and consumed it. He circulated his energy and refined the pill to replenish his magic power and mental energy. Luo Li took 2 steps forward and came to Yun Yao's side. She stared at the divine pearl in her palm and revealed a look of surprise. "This is great. Yao Yao, you finally got this divine pearl." Yun Yao held the divine pearl in her palm and was also filled with joy and excitement. She nodded and said sincerely, "Yes." Fortunately, Tianqing was here. He thought of this method and helped me get the divine pearl. Otherwise, even if the divine pearl was right in front of me, I would be helpless. Yun Yao spoke from the bottom of her heart and did not think too much about it. However, Luo Li's expression was rather awkward when she heard it. "Yes, yes, yes. Your Ji Tianqing is the most capable and powerful." Yun Yao turned her head to look at Luo Li and revealed a helpless bitter smile. She sent a sound transmission to Luo Li and asked, "Luo Li, you've always had a cold personality and you rarely get angry with others. Why are you at odds with Tianqing? You are the Divine Master's divine official. You are a magnanimous person. Don't get angry with Tianqing, okay?" Luo Li curled her lips and said unhappily, "It's not that I want to get angry with him, but he is really hateful. I get angry just by looking at him." Yun Yao was even more helpless. She smiled bitterly and said, "It seems that the two of you are born to be incompatible." Then, she stopped talking about this topic. After carefully putting away the divine pearl, she looked at the tip of the ship's bow. She saw endless black sand pouring down from the black hole and pouring onto the ship's bow. Previously, the divine pearl was hidden in the wreckage of the divine ship. No matter how much black sand poured down, it would disappear without a trace. However, now that the black sand poured into the bow, it quickly overflowed and scattered into the void. Seeing this, Yun Yao's eyes were filled with surprise. She said in a solemn tone, "Tianqing was right. The black sand was indeed swallowed by the divine pearl. This fourth divine pearl can not only merge with metal, but it can also swallow sand and convert it into divine power." Chapter 2036. This dark gold god pearl was the fourth god pearl that Yun Yao had obtained. The first 3 were blue sea, star, and longevity. This one was called Earth Spirit. Without a doubt, after she refined the Earth Spirit God Pearl, she would be able to control the power of the earth. However, this place was in the void, which was not suitable for cultivation. She could only keep the Earth Spirit God Pearl and refine it after she returned to the Luotian mountain. After about 2 days, Ji Tianqing finished his cultivation. His magic power and mental energy had recovered, and his strength had reached its peak. Seeing him get up, Luo Li said expressionlessly, "The void is dangerous. Since we have obtained the God Pearl and your magic power has recovered, we should leave. Ji Tianqing looked at her with a smile that was not a smile, and said in a playful tone, "What? Divine Official Luo predicted that I would not be able to do it, but I was lucky enough to do it. Divine Official Luo, don't you have anything to say to me?" Luo Li frowned and stared at him unhappily. "What do you want me to say?" Ji Tianqing pretended to think about it seriously, and said in a serious tone, "I have created an unimaginable miracle. You must be very shocked in your heart, and also admire me. However, you have a cold and arrogant personality, and you are not willing to admit defeat easily. It is impossible for you to show your admiration, so you can only hide it in your heart. I can understand your feelings and difficulties, and I will not force you to show your feelings. As long as you say, 'Young Master Ji, I am sorry,' I will forgive you for your previous rudeness. How about it? Am I being very lenient with you?" Luo Li was dumbfounded, and stared at him in disbelief. Her face was covered with frost, and her anger was getting stronger. She never thought that Ji Tianqing would dare to say such words. After being stunned for a moment, she came back to her senses and angrily scolded, "Ji Tianqing, I have never seen such a shameless person like you. Who is shocked? Who admires you? Who admires you? You narcissistic, arrogant bastard. Even if I admire a pig or a donkey, I will never admire you. You want me to apologize to you? Dream on." Luo Li was so angry that she almost went mad. Her status was so noble that for hundreds of years, no one had ever dared to act rashly in front of her. However, Ji Tianqing was completely unrestrained, which really opened her eyes. She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. In his fury, his words became much more vicious and he did not choose his words carefully. Ji Tianqing was not angry. He looked at her with a smile and said with a face full of surprise, "No. Miss Luo Li, a dignified divine official, actually admired pigs and donkeys? TSK, TSK, TSK. Divine Official Luo, your taste is really unique." Ji Tianqing. Luo Li furrowed her brows in anger as she glared at Ji Tianqing. Pointing her finger at him, she shouted, You're shameless." No matter how angry and furious she was, even if she was trembling with anger, she was powerless to refute. After all, she did have the intention of laughing at Ji Tianqing. However, she did not expect that Ji Tianqing would create a miracle and really take out the divine pearl. Now that she was being ridiculed by Ji Tianqing, she could only endure it. Seeing that Luo Li was angry, Yun Yao could only persuade Ji Tianqing, "Tianqing, stop talking and let Luo Li win." Ji Tianqing smiled at her and nodded. Yun Yao walked to Luo Li's side and pulled her arm. She comforted, "Luo Li, I believe that Tianqing didn't do it on purpose. Both of you should take a step back and stop being so angry, okay?" Luo Li suppressed her anger with great difficulty and glared at Ji Tianqing. She said in a low voice, "I don't want to see him." Yun Yao smiled bitterly and could only persuade, "Okay, we'll do as you say. Our mission has been completed and we will leave soon. After we leave the northern underworld mountain, I'll let him go back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains first. We'll go back to the Luotian mountain." Luo Li shook her head without hesitation and said, "I don't want to see him for even a second. Let's go now. After we return to the Ghost Desert, we'll go our separate ways. He'll go back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains alone and I'll escort you back to the Luotian mountain." Yun Yao naturally disagreed. She frowned and said, "The northern underworld mountain is very dangerous. The great demon saint is leading a large group of experts to hunt him down. How can we let Tianqing go alone? It's too dangerous." Luo Li also knew that this was a little inappropriate and hesitated. However, she was still angry. How could she give in? Isn't he very capable and has created miracles time and time again? It's just the northern underworld mountain and the great demon saint. What's there to be afraid of? Sigh. Yunyao could only sigh helplessly. Ji Tianqing glanced at Luo Li and thought to himself, women, really can't be offended. Once they're angry, they're unreasonable. Seeing that Yunyao was still comforting Luo Li, he was too lazy to interrupt. He turned around and looked at the wreckage of the divine battleship. Although this divine battleship has crashed into wreckage, it still has 5 kilometers of divine gold left. This is the best material for forging and upgrading divine weapons. It can only be found in the realm of the gods. I have to think of a way to get this wreckage of the divine battleship. In the future, if the Sword of Burial of Heaven wants to be upgraded to a divine weapon, it will definitely be useful. With this thought in mind, he released his divine sense to cover the entire wreckage and carefully observed it. The wreckage of the divine battleship was cold and dead. It was silently inserted into the 5 elements world. Other than Ji Tianqing and the other 2, there was no other living thing in the wreckage of the divine battleship. There wasn't even a wisp of remnant soul. Moreover, all traces of the divine battleship had disappeared. Now, the wreckage of the divine battleship was really a messy pile of divine gold. This pile of divine gold is 5 kilometers long and weighs more than 100 million pounds. If I use my divine sense, I should be able to move it. Ji Tianqing made up his mind and cast a few golden palms to hug the wreckage of the divine battleship. He gritted his teeth and exerted all his strength, trying to pull the wreckage of the divine battleship out. However, the wreckage of the divine battleship was inserted into the 5 elements world. It was firmly stuck in the spatial barrier and could not move at all. Ji Tianqing was unwilling to give up. He repeatedly tried more than 10 times, but he could not move the wreckage of the divine battleship. He could not pull it out at all. Damn it! I can't pull it out, nor can I refine it. Could it be that I can only look on helplessly and do nothing about it? Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered about a solution. However, at this moment, a blood-red dot of light lit up in the void hundreds of kilometers away. That blood-red dot of light was like a shooting star that cut through the void. It was as fast as the aurora. Yunyao and Luo Li both sensed that something was wrong. They frowned and looked at that blood-red dot of light with vigilance. What's that? It seems like there's a strong fighter approaching and coming straight for us. I can sense a strong demonic aura. Oh no, it's a strong fighter from the demon clan. Both of them sensed that the situation was not good. Their expressions became sinister, and they became cautious and vigilant. Luo Li also suppressed her anger. She stared at that dot of light, and a trace of fighting spirit surged in her eyes. In the blink of an eye, that blood-red dot of light came close and landed on the wreckage of the divine battleship. Swoosh! A blood-red light flashed, and 2 tall and burly figures appeared on the bronze wreckage of the divine battleship. They were 2 strong fighters from the demon clan with a strong demonic aura. Chapter 2037. Ji Tianqing, I've finally met you. The leader of the demon race was wearing a long robe that was as red as fire. There were pictures of white bones and demons embroidered on it. There was also a pair of mysterious ghost claws embroidered on his collar and chest. This person was more than 10 feet tall. He was burly and muscular. His hands that were exposed outside of his robe were a pair of black and cold sharp claws. His 5 sharp claws were long and sharp. There were also fine dragon scales on the surface of his skin that were emitting a black cold light. On his round head, there was a pair of big eyes. His pupils were blue in color and were flickering with blue flames. He had an arrogant posture and a majestic aura. He was emitting a domineering aura that looked down on the world and an unparalleled killing intent. He glared at Ji Tianqing with his big eyes. His cold and majestic voice contained unconcealable joy and excitement. Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and Luo Li immediately concluded. This demon dragon must be the most powerful person in the North Underworld Mountain and the leader of the 4 great demon saints. In comparison, the white-haired elder behind the great demon saint, who was wearing a purple robe, had 4 wings and 6 arms. He was much weaker in terms of aura. However, when Ji Tianqing saw the white-haired elder's face clearly, he frowned and his pupils contracted. Patriarch Xuepao. Obviously, the skinny and ferocious-looking white-haired elder was the 4th great demon saint, Patriarch Xuepao. Back in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Ji Tianqing and the Huanglong Daoist had joined forces to severely injure Patriarch Xuepao on the night that the Shihe sect was attacked. Patriarch Xuepao's physical body was destroyed and only his severely injured divine soul was left. He had fled in panic. Ji Tianqing was sure that if Patriarch Xuepao wanted to go into seclusion to heal his injuries, he would need at least a few decades or even a few centuries to recover. However, he knew the Ancestor Fiend Celestial's nature and knew that the Ancestor Fiend Celestial would not wait for such a long time. He would definitely use some kind of secret technique to help Patriarch Xuepao recover his strength as soon as possible. But now, Patriarch Xuepao appeared in the void. His body was intact and his strength had not decreased. The difference was that Patriarch Xuepao's body had changed. His body was as red as fire. He had 4 wings and 6 arms and his purple hair had turned white. Upon seeing this, Ji Tianqing was certain that he had guessed correctly. The Ancestor Fiend Celestial must have used a secret technique to restore Patriarch Xuepao in the shortest period of time. However, there must have been severe consequences and severe consequences. Sure enough, Ancestor Xuepao stared at Ji Tianqing with a malicious gaze and grinned coldly. Ji Tianqing. We met again. Ha ha ha. You definitely didn't expect this, did you? This old man has actually recovered his strength in such a short period of time. Patriarch Xuepao's voice was low and hoarse. His tone was cold and filled with hatred. Not long ago, this old man received the news that you had barged into the North Underworld mountain, and the great devil saint wanted to kill you personally. Such a heaven-sent opportunity, how could this old man miss it? Let's see how. Of you. Today, even if a god descends, he will not be able to save you. Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and said in a mocking tone, You recovered your strength so quickly. The ancestral devil god must have helped you. If I'm not wrong, the Ancestor Fiend Celestial must have used a secret technique to refine you into a magic treasure of the devil Dao. Ha ha ha. To be refined into a magic treasure, you must have suffered inhumane pain and torture, right? Patriarch Xuepao was exposed and poked at his sore spot. He recalled the pain and torture he had endured, and the Ancestor Fiend Celestial threw him into the abyss of the Blood Sea and refined him into a magic treasure. For half a year, his soul had been tortured hundreds of thousands of times. He was constantly crushed, distorted, and then restored to his original form. That was the most painful experience in his life. It was also a memory that he did not want to talk about. It was too painful. It was too terrifying. Now that Ji Tianqing was mocking him, Patriarch Xuepao was enraged. He roared hysterically. Ji Tianqing. You despicable beast, reptile. The pain and torture that I had to endure was all because of you. Originally, I could have gone into seclusion to recuperate for 100 years. After recovering my strength, I would have sought revenge on you. However, I could not wait that long. I would not give you the chance to grow. I gave up the possibility of increasing my realm. I could not break through in my lifetime, just to kill you as soon as possible. Today, if I don't tear you into pieces and burn you into ashes, how can I get rid of the hatred in my heart? I will let you have a taste of the pain of having your body and soul crushed 1,000,000 times. Patriarch Xuepao was furious. It went to his head and made him crazy. After roaring, he was about to charge towards Ji Tianqing and tear Ji Tianqing into pieces. However, the great demon sage, who was standing in front of him, stretched out his hand and stopped him. The great demon sage looked coldly at Yun Yao and Luo Li. He sneered proudly and said, I came to the Ghost Desert to kill Ji Tianqing. I did not expect that the heavens would bless me and give me such a big gift. One is the number one god's disciple of the Luoshui kingdom, the future goddess. The other is the personal maid of the Luoshui martial god, the most trusted divine official. He. After I kill Ji Tianqing, I will take you back to the demon palace and make you my concubines. By then, the reaction of the Luoshui martial god and the people of the god's kingdom will be very interesting, right? After saying that, the great demon sage sneered. His tone was very evil. Patriarch Xuepao was also very proud. He sneered contemptuously and said, "Great demon sage, these two lowly human slaves are so ugly. For them to be able to become your concubines and receive your favor, that is the fortune of their 8 lifetimes." Ha ha ha. The great demon sage laughed wildly and nodded. That's right. That's right. I am also making such a sacrifice for the great cause of my people. Luo Li and Yun Yao were so angry that their faces were pale. Their eyes were filled with shame and anger. Especially Luo Li, she was so angry that her body was trembling. Flames of killing intent surged out from behind her. Great demon sage. I have long heard of your fierce reputation and that you are the number one expert of the North Underworld Mountain. Luo Li is not talented, but as the great divine official under the divine master, I have long wanted to kill you and make a name for myself. Today, you have chased me into the void, so I have to thank you. Thank you for coming to die and giving me a chance to make a name for myself. Luo Li's tone was cold. Her eyes were cold, and her body was emitting an invisible heroic aura. Her chest was burning with a burning desire to fight. Her hands glowed, and 2 ice crystal daggers appeared in her hands. Great demon sage, I, Luo Li, will take your life. Luo Li shouted. Without hesitation, she held the still water dual swords and rushed toward the great demon sage. 2 crescent-shaped sword lights were released. Moon Star Water. The 2 crescent-shaped sword lights were more than 10 miles long. They were as dazzling as the moon in the sky, illuminating hundreds of miles of the void. Chapter 2038. Luo Li had long wanted to compete with the great demon saint. Now that she had made her move, she naturally used all of her strength. The 2 crescent-shaped sword lights locked onto the great demon saint's consciousness and aura, and attacked him from both sides, leaving him with nowhere to hide. Even if he tried to teleport away, it would be useless. The sword lights would cut through the void and chase after the great demon saint. Of course, the great demon saint was arrogant and did not bother to dodge. You want to take my life with such little tricks? You are too naive. The great demon saint sneered and immediately raised his hands, clenched his fists, and punched at the 2 sword lights. From his palms, a cold and deathly blue brilliance surged out and condensed into 2 huge black dragon claws, slapping at the 2 sword lights. Kaboom! The deafening sound of the collision exploded in the void. A violent force burst out, shaking the surrounding hundreds of miles. Even the wreckage of the divine battleship trembled and shook. The sword lights and the black dragon claws collapsed at the same time, turning into streams of light and scattering in the void. Luo Li waved the short sword in her hands, and sword lights filled the sky once again, attacking the great demon saint. The great demon saint did not retreat, and with his black dragon claws, he released a monstrous demonic shadow and fought with Luo Li. The 2 martial saints fought fiercely in the sky. Light and shadow flew in all directions, and layers of shock waves were generated. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ancestor Xuepao roared and turned into a bloody light, pouncing toward Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, you bastard, give me your life. Ancestor Xuepao roared and flapped his 4 wings, waving his 6 arms, and releasing bloody light blades that covered the sky. Ji Tianqing was immediately enveloped by the bloody light blades, and had to bear the attack of thousands of bloody light blades. However, he was not afraid, and with a flash of brilliance in his right hand, the sword of burial of heaven appeared. 7-star sword. With a thrust of the sword of burial of heaven, 49 giant swords formed a mysterious formation and bloomed in all directions. With a series of muffled bangs, the cold light of the huge sword shattered the blood-red blades that filled the sky, tearing out a huge gap. More than half of the remaining bloody blades were destroyed by Yun Yao. The remaining hundreds of sharp blades pierced Ji Tianqing, but they did not have much power, they did not injure him at all. Seeing this, Patriarch Xue Pao's pupils constricted, revealing an extremely shocked expression. Ji Tianqing. Your physical body is actually comparable to a martial saint expert. How is this possible? He remembered clearly that Ji Tianqing had not broken through to the martial sage realm. How could he possess the physical body of a martial sage? While he was still in a daze, Ji Tianqing had already transformed into a streak of light and charged over with sword in hand. Heaven cleaving sword. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and slashed out a 1,000-foot-long golden sword toward Patriarch Xue Pao. The sword light was dazzling and extraordinarily powerful. Even the void was rippling. Patriarch Xue Pao did not dare to be careless. He quickly suppressed his shock and focused on his opponent. With a swoosh, he folded his 4 wings and released a blood-red light that shot up to the sky to protect himself. Blood Sea, 10,000 slaves protect master. The surging blood-red light was like a 1,000-foot-wide shield that protected Patriarch Xue Pao. The blood-red light surged like waves of blood. There were even tens of thousands of demonic shadows that bared their fangs and brandished their claws. Boom! The huge golden sword struck the blood-red light and a deafening explosion erupted. Although a crack was formed in the blood-red light, countless blood-red flames spurted out. However, the huge golden sword sank into the blood sea and was quickly corroded, completely disappearing. Patriarch Xue Pao had successfully neutralized Ji Tianqing's attack and was not injured. Only then did he feel relieved. He. I thought you had broken through to the martial sage realm. I did not expect it to be like this. So what if your defense is comparable to a martial sage's? Your secret skill will not be able to do anything to me. Patriarch Xue Pao laughed proudly and waved his 6 arms again. He released a blood-red light that covered the sky and poured it down on Ji Tianqing. Endless blood sea. The blood-red light that covered the sky was like a flood that sealed off the sky and poured down on Ji Tianqing's body. In an instant, the area within a 200-mile radius turned into a blood sea. The waves in the blood sea surged up to the sky. The demonic shadows overlapped and attacked Ji Tianqing crazily. The blood sea had the power to corrode one's physical body and spiritual soul. It formed hundreds of spells and continuously attacked Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing was trapped in the blood sea and had to bear the full force of Patriarch Xue Pao's attack. It would be difficult for him to escape in a short period of time. Moreover, he had to use his mana shield to resist the corrosion of the blood sea. The shield was constantly broken and repaired, draining his mana rapidly. If this dragged on for too long, his mana would be depleted. Then, his combat ability would weaken rapidly and he would be no match for Patriarch Xue Pao. Fortunately, Yun Yao relied on the protection of the reverse water divine sword. Not only did she resist the corrosion of the blood sea, but she also rushed to Ji Tianqing's vicinity. Tianqing, don't panic. I'll help you. Yun Yao's expression was cold as she shouted in a low voice. She flew to Ji Tianqing's side and held the reverse water divine sword with both hands. She slashed down with all her might. Sword bestowed by God, repel water and repel demons. The icy blue reverse water divine sword released a terrifying divine power. It formed a 1,000-foot-long icy blue sword light and slashed at the raging blood sea. The sword light was like a bright moon that cut through the night sky and illuminated the world. It was like a thunderbolt that tore through the night and dispelled all darkness. Its power was like the wrath of a god. Its power was boundless. Boom! The sword light slashed at the blood sea, creating a loud sound that shook the universe. It spread thousands of miles in the void. The surging, evil sea of blood was actually split into two by the sword light, creating an abyss in the middle. The blood sea was broken. Endless blood light scattered in the void and quickly dissipated. The sword light moved forward with indomitable will. It slashed for hundreds of miles before stopping. The blood sea that Patriarch Xue Pao had condensed with all his strength was split in half by Yun Yao's sword. It fell into the void in pieces. Swoosh! The blood sea was broken. Patriarch Xue Pao also suffered a heavy blow and was sent flying in a sorry state. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing was shocked and excited. This is incredible. Yao Yao, this divine sword is so powerful that you can send Patriarch Xue Pao flying with just one slash. Yun Yao's face was pale. She held the reverse water divine sword with both hands and panted violently. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, she nodded and said while panting, "Yes, the sword that the Divine Master made himself and carries with him everywhere. Its power is naturally extraordinary. Especially since I have mastered the art of controlling the divine sword these few years. That's why I can use 30% of the divine sword's power and use this ultimate technique. However, with my current strength, I can only use it 3 times at most before I'm exhausted." Only then did Ji Tianqing understand the reason, and his excited mood immediately calmed down. At the same time, Patriarch Xue Pao flew back. He was only slightly injured. It did not affect his battle. His momentum was even more ferocious. Ha ha ha. *TCH, do you think you can kill me with the reverse water divine sword? What a joke. I spent half a year in the abyss of the blood sea. It's already an extreme path demonic weapon. Chapter 2039. Extreme Path Demonic Weapon. Yun Yao frowned, and her serious expression became even more puzzled. Ji Tianqing explained, Extreme Path Demonic Weapon is one of the secret techniques of the ancient demons. It's extremely vicious and powerful. Using this secret technique can refine demons and demonic beasts into demonic dharma artifacts. They'll be as tough as puppets and won't feel pain. But their souls and consciousness will be preserved. They'll still have the ability to think. In the ancient war of the gods, the demons refined the severely injured demons and demonic beasts into extreme path demonic weapons in order to preserve their combat power. That's an extremely powerful and terrifying team. Like the blood god, they're the most terrifying force of the demons. Yun Yao roughly understood what he meant. She became even more cautious when dealing with Patriarch Xue Pao. Moonlight Cascade. She charged at Patriarch Xue Pao again. She waved the reverse water divine sword and slashed out a 10-mile-wide white sword light. The sword light was as bright as the moon. It slashed at Patriarch Xue Pao like a cascade that covered the sky. Patriarch Xue Pao said arrogantly. But in reality, he didn't dare to underestimate the power of the reverse water divine sword. He could only fight back with all his might. Ji Tianqing took this opportunity to attack with his sword. He joined forces with Yun Yao. Sky-splitting sword. The sword light was as bright as the sun. It cut through the dark and cold void and slashed at Patriarch Xue Pao. Bam, bam, bam. A series of muffled sounds resounded in the void. Patriarch Xue Pao used his secret technique to release 4 blood dragons to block Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's attacks. The two sides started fighting in the void. It was hard to tell who had the upper hand. As the battle became more and more intense, the 3 of them left the remains of the divine worship and moved into the void. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao joined forces and fought with Patriarch Xue Pao for thousands of rounds. But they still couldn't kill him. Patriarch Xue Pao was severely injured. He looked terrible. 2 of his 4 blood wings had been chopped off. The remaining 2 were in tatters. 2 of the 6 arms had been shattered, and the remaining 4 were badly mutilated. In addition, his entire body was riddled with wounds, and there were barely any intact pieces of flesh. Dark purple demon blood seeped out of the numerous wounds on his body, turning him into a bloody man. If Patriarch Xuepao had not been refined into an extreme Dao demonic weapon, his body would have been destroyed long ago. However, things were different now. His physical body had been refined with a secret technique, and his defensive power had increased by several times. Even though he was severely injured, he could still retain 30 to 40% of his combat strength and tenaciously resist Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's siege. As for Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao, their injuries were not light either. Their hair was disheveled, their white robes were stained with blood, their faces were ghastly pale, and their breathing was somewhat chaotic. After fighting for 2 hours, the two of them had used up 60 to 70% of their magic power. Their battle prowess had also weakened a lot. However, the two of them refused to give up before killing Patriarch Xuepao. 5-colored divine lightning. Meteor fall. The two of them gritted their teeth and continued to use their secret techniques to increase the pace of their attacks. Patriarch Xuepao's power was getting weaker and weaker, and his injuries were getting worse. He was forced to retreat, and it was difficult for him to withstand the attacks. Patriarch Xuepao was about to lose. He could hold on for another 15 minutes at most, and then he would be killed by the couple. However, at this critical moment, a dark purple flowing light came from not far away. Swoosh! Inside the dark purple flowing light was a demon more than 10 feet tall, wearing a red robe. It was the great demon saint. His clothes were ragged, his hair was messy, and his entire body was covered in blood. His entire left arm was dangling weakly. At first glance, the great demon saint looked like he was in a mess, as if he had been severely injured. However, that was not the case. He was only slightly injured, and his strength was still as powerful as ever. Black Dragon Fist. Like a ghost, he teleported behind Ji Tianqing, raised his right fist and punched towards him. The two of them were only 10,000 feet apart. When Ji Tianqing realized that something was wrong, it was already too late, and there was no way for him to dodge. Bam! The giant black dragon fist landed on Ji Tianqing, and sent him flying 10 miles away. While he was still in the air, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire back was covered in cracks, and pale golden blood was seeping out of them. Fortunately, his body had been tempered thousands of times, and his defense was extremely strong. That was why he was able to block the great demon saint's punch. Otherwise, the great demonic saint's punch would have turned him into dust on the spot. No. Yun Yao saw Ji Tianqing being attacked with her own eyes, and her face was filled with shock. She was extremely worried. Instinctively, she rushed over and tried to save Ji Tianqing. However, the great demon saint had already predicted her reaction. His right fist turned into a claw, and a black light shot out from it. Black Dragon Palm. The black dragon palm shadow that blotted out the sky carried a domineering might that could suppress everything as it struck Yun Yao. Although Yun Yao saw that things were not going well, she quickly waved her divine sword to block the attack. However, her cultivation level was too low. How could she block the great demon saint's attack? Kaboom! Bam! The sword chi in the sky was smashed into pieces, and Yun Yao was also hit by the black dragon palm. Blood spurted out of her 7 orifices. Maybe it was a coincidence, or maybe the great demon saint did it on purpose. After flying for 10 miles, she landed right next to Ji Tianqing. The great demon saint had used a powerful attack to severely injure the two of them. By the time she and Ji Tianqing wiped the blood off their faces and regained their composure, Patriarch Xuepao had charged over again. Ji Tianqing. It's time for you to die. Patriarch Xuepao was smug, and he sneered. He held a white bone spear and thrust it at them at lightning speed. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao quickly dodged the attack and cast spells to block Patriarch Xue Pao's attack. At the same time, their hearts sank, and they became more worried. Damn it! Isn't the great demon saint fighting with Luo Li? Why did he suddenly appear? This is not good. Could it be that Luo Li is no match for the great demon saint and has been killed? Ji Tianqing knew that Luo Li was no match for the great demon saint. However, he could not believe that the great demon saint could kill Luo Li. Just as he and Yunyao were retreating, the great demon saint was closing in on them, trying to kill them on the spot. At the critical moment, two cold sword chi suddenly flashed and attacked the great demon saint and Patriarch Xue Pao. Swoosh! Swoosh! Cold light flashed, and sword chi swept out. It was Luo Li. Her hair was disheveled, and her face was covered in blood. Her clothes were soaked in blood, and she looked extremely miserable. Her whole body was covered with hideous wounds. There were hundreds of them, and they were so deep that her bones could be seen. It was a miracle that her body had not collapsed after being severely injured to this extent. She waved the still water dual swords with all her strength and stabbed out two sword chi to save Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. The great demon saint dodged one of the sword chi. The other sword chi stabbed Patriarch Xue Pao, and a bloody hole appeared in his chest. Demonic blood splattered everywhere. Chapter 2040. Although Luo Li was severely injured, she was at the end of her rope. Although she was no match for the great demon saint, she was still able to defeat Patriarch Xue Pao. After defeating Patriarch Xue Pao, she dashed toward the great demon saint crazily and slashed out dozens of sword rays. Swoosh! Swoosh! 64 giant swords that were thousands of feet long formed an oval-shaped sword array and enveloped the great demon saint. The great demon saint wanted to kill Ji Tianqing, but he could only give up and focus on defending against Luo Li's attacks. While attacking the great demon saint, Luo Li shouted to Ji Tianqing and Yunyao through telepathy, "You too. What are you waiting for? Run away. I'll hold the great demon saint back. Run away. Quick." Her voice was hoarse and low, and her tone was filled with grief and anxiety. At this moment, she was no longer as noble, elegant, cold, and holy as before. It was as if she was a completely different person. In the face of death, she could no longer care about her manners and dignity. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were severely injured, and they were trying to suppress their injuries. Hearing Luo Li's shout, the two of them were stunned and realized the seriousness of the situation. *T. Luo Li can't defeat the great demon saint, and she's severely injured. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked worried. Yunyao's expression turned even uglier. She was extremely worried. On the surface, it looks like she's attacking fiercely, but it's actually a last-ditch effort. She's trying to hold the great demon saint back so that we can have more time to run away. Tianqing, we can't hesitate. We have to run away now. Of course, Ji Tianqing knew that they had already lost this battle. If they continued to fight, they would definitely lose their lives. However, he was unwilling to run away just like that. He turned his head and looked at the void not far away. Patriarch Xue Pao was covered in blood, and there was a huge hole in his chest that was still bleeding. He could not feel any pain, and he was trying to suppress his injuries. He quickly gathered a ball of bloody light and covered his body. "Yao Yao, give me some time," Ji Tianqing said in a low voice. As soon as he finished speaking, he forced his heavily injured body to rush toward Patriarch Xue Pao like a bolt of lightning. Shwa! In the blink of an eye, he had crossed 30 miles and arrived in front of Patriarch Xue Pao. Patriarch Xue Pao immediately woke up and raised his head to look at Ji Tianqing. Fear flashed in his eyes as he shouted, "What do you want to do, Ji Tianqing? Luo Li has already been defeated, and you guys are about to die at the hands of the great demon saint. Do you still want to put up a desperate struggle? Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time talking nonsense with him. He directly raised his right hand and fiercely slapped out. God-slaying spear. Boundless golden divine flames gushed out of his palm and formed a divine spear, thrusting toward Patriarch Xue Pao. The divine spear was 30 meters long, and it was burning with fierce golden flames, releasing an extremely terrifying aura. Patriarch Xue Pao's spiritual soul had been locked down. Being in the empty void, there was no way for him to escape. Feeling the terrifying power of the God-slaying spear, he felt fear from the bottom of his soul. His eyes widened in shock. No! Patriarch Xue Pao roared in horror. He instinctively raised his arms and spread out 2 tattered wings to protect his vital parts. He still didn't want to give up, and he desperately teleported 10 miles away. However, the God-slaying spear was so fast that it instantly pierced through 10 miles of the void and hit him. Boom! A deafening sound burst out, shaking the void and spreading for thousands of miles. A dazzling golden flame bloomed in the void like a mushroom cloud. The void within 3,000 miles was lit up by the golden light. Patriarch Xue Pao's body was already covered with wounds and was on the verge of being destroyed. After suffering such a heavy blow, his physical body collapsed on the spot. He was blasted into billions of pieces and scattered in the void. Even his weak spiritual soul was pierced through by the God-slaying spear and shattered into several pieces. The golden divine flames surged and burned the pieces of flesh and spiritual soul into ashes. It was all over. Even though Patriarch Xue Pao had been refined into an extreme path demonic weapon, he couldn't escape the fate of death. In the end, he was still killed by Ji Tianqing. Not even his bones were left behind. Ji Tianqing looked at the golden flames in the sky expressionlessly. After confirming that Patriarch Xue Pao was dead, he turned around and left. Yunyao hurriedly rushed forward to meet him. Despite her heavy injuries, she dragged him towards the wreckage of the divine warship. Dozens of miles away, Luoli was still crazily attacking the great demon saint. She didn't care about her life at all. She was fighting with her life on the line. Even though she wasn't as powerful as the great demon saint, she was still able to stall the great demon saint and prevent him from escaping. 10 breaths later, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao returned to the remains of the divine battleship and stood at the front of the ship. The two of them turned around and looked at Luoli with complicated expressions. Yunyao was worried. She sent a voice transmission to Luoli anxiously, "Luoli, run. Don't fight." Luoli ignored her and continued to attack the great demon saint. At the same time, she replied, "No. I have to stall the great demon saint. Only then will you have a chance to escape. If I also run away, the 3 of us will die here." Yunyao understood the meaning behind her words. She became even more anxious and tried to persuade her, "Luoli, don't be stupid. If you don't run away, you will die. If the 3 of us work together." Before she could finish speaking, Luoli interrupted her. She said in a low and hoarse voice, "Before we came to the North Underworld Mountain, I said that it is my responsibility to help you find the divine orb. No matter what, I will protect you and let you return to the Luotian Mountain safely. I have made up my mind. You don't have to say anything more." Yunyao saw that Luoli was determined to die, but she was still so stubborn. Her heart ached, and her eyes were covered with a layer of mist. At this time, Luoli turned around and glanced at Ji Tianqing. She said in a cold and indifferent voice, "Ji Tianqing, Yao Yao is the best girl in the world. She is destined to become the god of Luo River in the future. No matter what, please cherish her and protect her. Don't let her be wronged. I know you hate me, but I am not targeting you on purpose. I am doing this for Yao Yao. Go, take Yao Yao and leave. Send her back to the Luotian Mountain safely. From now on, you and I don't owe each other anything." Luoli's voice was calm and cold, revealing her determination. After she finished speaking, she no longer cared about Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. She rushed toward the great demon sage without any regard for her own safety. Her whole body was covered in blue flames. At this time, she held her head high and her chest out. She had regained her usual cold and arrogant attitude. Her expression was as calm as water. However, her flesh and blood and the soul in her mind were burning fiercely. The blue flames that soared into the sky lit up the void for thousands of miles. It was like a phoenix spreading its wings and soaring in the sky. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's bodies shook. They immediately understood her intentions. Their pupils shrank, and they subconsciously cried out in grief. No! Luo Li! Don't self-destruct! However, Luo Li could no longer hear them. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Soul to Luo River, no more reincarnation. Chapter 2041. Boom! A loud explosion shook the heavens, and endless blue flames lit up the sky. A mass of dazzling and magnificent ice-blue flames blotted out the sky and blotted out the sky. It was like the brightest star in the sky and the most beautiful fireworks in a festival. However, it was formed by Luo Li's soul. No matter how dazzling it was sad and sorrowful, and it made one's heart clench. Even though Ji Tianqing had a strong will, seeing Luo Li explode and die with his own eyes still made him feel sad. Thinking back to the words he had said to anger Luo Li, he felt guilty. The resolute words that Luo Li had said before she blew herself up still lingered in his mind, not dissipating for a long time. Yun Yao's eyes stared at the blue flames in the sky, and her body started to tremble. Her face was as white as a sheet, and 2 drops of tears rolled down her cheeks. Deep sorrow filled her mind and caused her heart to ache. All sorts of memories surfaced in her mind. When she had just arrived at the Luotian mountain, she was in an unfamiliar environment, and she was sad and lonely. It was Luo Li who came to her side, accompanied her, and helped her. All kinds of scenes, including Luo Li's frown, smile, and words, were still vivid in her mind. But now, they were separated forever, and they would never be able to see each other again. Swoosh! The flames from Luo Li's explosion spread in all directions. The icy blue shockwave had the power to destroy everything, and it swept across a radius of a few thousand miles. Seeing the shockwave, Ji Tianqing was shocked. He hurriedly pulled Yun Yao away from the wreckage of the divine battleship and flew toward the quicksand. The black sand poured down from the black hole like a flood and entered the wreckage of the divine battleship. If they wanted to escape back to the ghost desert, they could only go against the flow and pass through the black hole. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing hugged the heartbroken Yun Yao tightly, passed through the black sand, and entered the black hole. When the destructive icy blue shockwave engulfed the wreckage of the divine battleship, the 2 of them had already disappeared. In the next moment, the 2 of them passed through the black hole and returned to the ghost desert. Shwa! A ball of dazzling golden light wrapped tightly around Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao as it flew out of the black sand vortex. Yun Yao was already an arrow at the end of its flight, unable to protect herself. Passing through the spatial black hole, one would have to endure the attacks of the spatial crack and the power of the void. It was Ji Tianqing who used his dermic powers to form a shield to protect him and Yun Yao, allowing them to pass through the black hole smoothly. Even though he succeeded, his vitality was greatly damaged, and his injuries became even more severe. Fortunately, he and Yun Yao had finally escaped from the void and were out of danger. However, before he could see the scene around him clearly, he heard bursts of exclamations and shouts. Oh my God! He actually managed to escape back. It's Ji Tianqing. He is Ji Tianqing. What are you waiting for? Kill him. The great demon saint has ordered us to tear this man into pieces. We must not let him go. Shouts of shock and excitement sounded around the vortex one after another. Ji Tianqing immediately recognized that those were the voices of many powerful demon clan cultivators. He raised his head and looked around. Only then did he see the situation around him clearly. He saw dozens of powerful demon clan cultivators standing around the black sand vortex with a radius of hundreds of miles. There were more than a dozen tribulation stage cultivators wearing black armor and holding swords and dharma treasures. There were also more than a dozen ferocious and ever-changing blood gods illusions. In addition, there were more than 20 demonic beasts that were as large as mountains and had ferocious and violent auras. Whether it was the powerful demon clan cultivators, blood gods illusions, or demonic beasts, they all stared at him excitedly, their eyes full of bloodthirsty murderous intent. There was no need for anyone to give an order. All the powerful demon clan cultivators and blood gods illusions used powerful secret techniques to besiege him. Suddenly, overwhelming bloody light, demonic chi, and dharma spell shadows drowned Ji Tianqing and Yunyao like a monstrous flood. Both of them were seriously injured. It was not easy for them to escape from the void, but they were besieged by so many powerful demon clan cultivators. They were in imminent danger, and their lives were at stake. However, Ji Tianqing had known that the great demon saint had brought a large number of powerful cultivators with him, so he was prepared. When the Dharma spell shadows fell from the sky, he held the seriously injured Yunyao in his left arm and waved his right hand to release a sky full of thunderbolts. 5-colored divine thunderbolts. The 5-colored thunderbolts with the power to annihilate everything penetrated the bloody light in the sky and scattered around the black sand vortex. Suddenly, several powerful demon clan cultivators were hit by the thunderbolts and turned into black ashes on the spot. Their bodies and souls were destroyed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ji Tianqing took Yunyao through the huge hole, rushed out of the black sand vortex, and escaped from the encirclement of the demon clan cultivators. Many powerful demon clan cultivators reacted immediately and chased after them. However, Ji Tianqing had already summoned the black dragon. Swoosh! The black dragon carried him and Yunyao and flew across the sky at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the gray clouds. Dozens of powerful demon clan cultivators chased desperately for thousands of miles, but they completely lost track of the black dragon and could only return empty-handed. The power of Luo Li's self-destruction was, of course, extremely terrifying. The icy blue shockwave was enough to destroy thousands of miles of heaven and earth. Any living being below the Saint Realm would not be able to survive. However, no matter how powerful the shockwave was, it could not destroy the wreckage of the divine ship, nor could it damage the golden light seal of the 5 elements world. The shockwave hit the golden light seal, but it was blocked and quickly dissipated. After a long time, the icy blue flames that covered thousands of miles of the void gradually disappeared. The void returned to silence once more, leaving no trace behind as if nothing had happened. Luo Li had also completely disappeared, leaving not even a speck of dust behind. Thousands of miles away from the wreckage of the divine ship, in the empty void, a figure floated quietly. It was the great demon saint, who was seriously injured and unconscious. The red robe and armor that he was wearing, as well as his long hair, had all disappeared. His body, which was covered with black dragon scales, was also covered with dense cracks, and thousands of drops of demon blood seeped out. At this moment, he was like a porcelain bowl that was covered with cracks, and would shatter with a touch. However, his injuries were not limited to this. Not only was his physical body on the verge of collapse, but his soul was also seriously injured, and he was unconscious. He had lost consciousness, and was like a leaf, a piece of black paper, quietly floating in the void. After an unknown period of time, perhaps half a month, finally, the great demon saint's eyelids moved, and he gradually opened his eyes. Damn bitch! She did not hesitate to self-destruct to injure me, how hateful. His lips moved, and he muttered in a venomous tone. Then, he slowly sat up, took out a pile of black, purple, and red elixirs, and consumed them. After a few days of cultivation, he had recovered some of his vitality, and he flew back leisurely. When he returned to the wreckage of the divine ship, he was stunned when he saw that it was not damaged at all, and there was not even a trace left behind. What kind of metal is this? It withstood the power of a martial saint's self-destruction, and it was not damaged at all. Chapter 2042. When he had first arrived in the void, the great devil saint's attention had been focused on Ji Tianqing. At that time, he had only glanced at the remains of the divine battleship and had not paid much attention to it. Now that the matter had passed, the remains of the divine battleship had endured a great battle and been swept away by the shockwaves from Luo Li's self-destruction, but there were no traces of it left behind. This had attracted the great devil saint's attention. He stood on the remains of the divine battleship and carefully observed it for a long time, even using his divine sense to scan it dozens of times. In the end, he could tell that it was the remains of a treasure. Furthermore, the shape and style of this treasure were not found in the Shenwu continent. He was certain that this was a high-grade treasure that had come from beyond the heavens. Even if it was just a treasure, the materials used to make it were extraordinary, far surpassing the various refining materials of the Shenwu continent. This is definitely a divine-grade refining material. It can definitely be used to refine a divine weapon. Such a rare treasure has actually been encountered by me. How can I miss it? The great devil saint stared at the remains of the divine battleship with a burning gaze, feeling rather excited. Although I was unable to kill that bastard Ji Tianqing, I was able to force Luo Li to self-destruct, and I was even able to pick up the remains of a divine weapon. This can be considered as making up for my regrets. With this thought in mind, the great devil saint's regret and frustration at not being able to kill Ji Tianqing was greatly diluted. He could not wait to use his secret technique, releasing 4 enormous black dragon claws that could cover the sky and drag the remains of the divine battleship away. In his mind, it was just the remains of a divine weapon that had lost all of its divine power, so it should be easy for him to capture it. However, he did not expect that no matter how much force he used, the remains of the divine battleship would not budge. Unwilling to give up, he used other secret techniques to try and move the remains of the divine battleship. However, the results were the same. The divine sword remains were firmly embedded in the 5 elements world and could not be moved at all. I don't believe it. It's just a mystical remnant that has lost all of its divine power. How can it not be moved? The great devil saint frowned, and his face turned purple from anger. Over the next 2 days, he tried all sorts of methods to move the remains of the divine weapon. He did not even hesitate to use a saint artifact to try and pull it out. However, everything he did was in vain. The divine artifact remains were incomparably sturdy, as if they had become one with the 5 elements world. 2 days later, the great demon saint had no choice but to give up and leave. Damn it! I can only look at the remains of the divine artifact with my own eyes, but I can't take it for myself. How infuriating! No, wait until I return to the North Underworld Mountain, I'll think of another way. If I can't do anything about it, I'll report this matter to Lord Demon God. He'll definitely have a way. With that thought in mind, the great demonic saint also passed through the black sand and entered the spatial hole. Shwa! In the next moment, the great demon saint escaped from the void and returned to the space above the black sand vortex. Around the whirlpool, there were still a few demon race experts guarding it. Seeing the great demonic saint appear, everyone immediately surrounded him and bowed respectfully. The great demon saint looked around, frowned and asked, "Where are the others? Where did they all go? That bastard Ji Tianqing, have you caught him yet?" The few demon clan experts trembled in fear, stammering and not daring to answer. "Are all of you deaf?" The great demon saint had a bad premonition, so he pointed at one of the demon race experts and shouted, "You tell me." The demon race expert who was pointed out could only answer truthfully, reporting to Lord Demon Saint, "That bastard Ji Tianqing has escaped from our encirclement and is nowhere to be seen. The others have spread out and are searching for Ji Tianqing's whereabouts." The great demon saint frowned fiercely, his eyes flashed with killing intent, and said angrily, "It's just as I expected. He really escaped. Damn bastard, he actually managed to escape from our encirclement with such heavy injuries." After this incident, the great demon saint finally understood how difficult it was to deal with Ji Tianqing. He glared at the few demon race experts and scolded them harshly, "You bunch of trash, what use do I have for you? Send a message to the others, tell them to get back here, I want to punish them severely." The few demon race experts were filled with fear, and their bodies were trembling in fear, but they quickly nodded and agreed. Unknowingly, a month had passed. In the evening, the Black Dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao back to Luotian Mountain. Ever since Ji Tianqing left, he had not returned for more than 2 years. However, the tall, majestic, and sacred Luotian Mountain did not change much, and still looked the same as before. The setting sun shone, and the afterglow was golden, creating a peaceful scene. The Luotian Mountain was surrounded by white clouds, and the golden light was faintly discernible, adding to the sacred aura. Ji Tianqing stood on the back of the dragon, looking down at the Luotian Mountain in front of him, and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Ever since he escaped from the Black Sand Vortex, he rode the Black Dragon and left the North Underworld Mountain without stopping, rushing back to the Luotian Kingdom. Yunyao was seriously injured, and it almost affected Yaya and Qinchin in her womb. Ji Tianqing was worried about her and the 2 children's safety, so he let her enter the Sword World, and she had been in seclusion to heal her injuries. He did not rush back to Tianzhu Mountain, and went straight back to Luotian Mountain for Yunyao's safety. After all, Tianzhu Mountain was not far from North Underworld Mountain, and it was not safe. If the great demon saint wanted to kill him, he would definitely chase after him, and it would be very dangerous. Luotian Mountain was located in the hinterland of the Luotian Kingdom, and it was the safest place. Moreover, Yunyao not only had to go into seclusion to heal her injuries, but she also had to refine the Earth Spirit Divine Pearl as soon as possible. Only by staying at Luotian Mountain would he be most at ease. Swoosh! The Black Dragon passed through layers of clouds and landed on the peak of Luotian Mountain. Ji Tianqing had just returned to the Cloud Water Palace, and the Golden Dragon and Black Eagle came up to him and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, young Master Ji." Ji Tianqing waved his hand, indicating that the 2 could dispense with the formalities, and quickly rushed back to Yunyao's room. The Black Eagle hurriedly followed, and asked with concern, "Young Master, why did you suddenly come back? Where is Master? Is she not with you?" Ji Tianqing calmly explained, "Don't worry, Yao Yao came back with me, and she is fine." Black Eagle, quickly go and report to Granny Long that I have something to discuss with her. The Black Eagle naturally did not dare to delay, and hurriedly replied, "Yes," and turned to leave. Ji Tianqing walked around the room and saw that Yunyao's room was as clean as ever, and the windows were bright and clean. He could not help but reveal a gratified expression. At least, during the time when he was not at Luotian Mountain, no one dared to neglect Yunyao, and they would serve her wholeheartedly. He opened the Sword World and summoned Yunyao. Swoosh! A white light flashed, and Yunyao appeared in the room. She had already changed into a tidy moon-white dress, and her hair was meticulously combed, looking as ethereal as before. After a month of seclusion to recuperate, her injuries had already recovered by 80%, and there were no major problems. Her complexion had also returned to normal, and no one could tell that she was injured. However, her eyes were a little dim, and there was a hint of worry in her eyes, and her heart was heavy. Chapter 2043. Ji Tianqing could see that Yunyao was in a heavy mood, so he tried to comfort her. "Yao Yao, the dead are gone. Don't wallow in sorrow and blame yourself anymore." Luo Li was the Divine Master's most trusted and valued divine official. She was also loyal to the Divine Master and swore to serve him with her life. The Divine Master ordered her to accompany you to find the Divine Orb and protect you. She sacrificed herself to protect us. This was not only because of your sisterly love, but also because of her loyalty to the Divine Master. What we need to do is not wallow in sorrow and blame ourselves. We need to pull ourselves together and find a way to avenge her. Ji Tianqing was the person who understood Yunyao the most. He could see that Yunyao blamed herself for Luo Li's death. In fact, he also felt a little guilty, but he never showed it. However, he was calmer and would not act on impulse. He knew that Luo Li had died for her loyalty and she had no regrets. The most important thing for him and Yunyao to do was to kill the great demon saint and avenge Luo Li. Yunyao remained silent and only nodded. Ji Tianqing tried to persuade her again. Yao Yao, I have already asked Black Eagle to inform Granny Long. She will be here soon. Let's first report what happened in detail to Granny Long and let her send a message to the Divine Master. Let's see what the Divine Master decides. Okay. Yunyao nodded again and replied. Just as he said, Granny Long rushed over in a short while. As soon as she entered the room, she asked impatiently, Yunyao, Tianqing. You are both back. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao quickly bowed. Granny Long stood in front of the two of them and looked at Ji Tianqing from head to toe. Then, she revealed a gratified smile. Tianqing, I haven't seen you for more than 2 years. Your strength has become even more unfathomable. You have improved again. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and did not say much. Granny Long then looked at Yunyao and said, Yao Yao, you and Divine Official Luo went to North Underworld Mountain to search for the Divine Pearl. You must have gone through a lot of dangers. Now that you've returned safe and sound, I'm relieved. Oh right, did you find the Divine Orb? What about Divine Official Luo? Why don't I see her? Hearing this, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's hearts became heavier and heavier. How astute was Granny Long? Seeing that the two of them were silent and had strange expressions, she suddenly had a bad premonition. Tianqing, Yunyao, say something. What about Divine Official Luo? Why didn't she come back? Could it be that something happened to her? As she asked, the smile on Granny Long's face and the anticipation and gratification in her eyes quickly disappeared. Yunyao could no longer hold back her sadness. She bowed to Granny Long and said in a sorrowful voice, Granny, it's all Yunyao's fault. It's all my fault. Granny Long's expression changed. Her eyes were filled with shock. She asked anxiously, Yunyao, what happened? Divine Official Luo is one of the best martial saints. How could something happen to her? Yunyao's eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She said in a sorrowful voice, we found the traces of the Divine Orb in North Underworld Mountains Ghost Desert. But we had fought with the demon race's experts and revealed our whereabouts. We were surrounded by the great demon saint. She told Granny Long everything that had happened. After Granny Long heard it, she was shocked and angry. Her eyes were filled with mist. She couldn't help but shed tears. How could this happen? Divine Official Luo was so young and talented. She was favored by the Divine Lord. How could she be forced to self-detonate? Goddamned demon race. Goddamned great demon saint. Granny Long's hatred for the demon race had reached its peak. She couldn't wait to kill the great demon saint to avenge Luo Li. However, Granny Long was a martial saint who had lived for 1,000 to 2,000 years. She had experienced all kinds of storms. Not long after, she calmed down. Her face was solemn and her eyes were cold. She said in a low voice, Luo Li's death and the death of hundreds of millions of Divine Nation citizens were caused by the demon race. Our Luo River Divine Nation and the North Underworld Mountain cannot live under the same sky. No matter what, we must expel the demon race and kill all of them to avenge Luo Li and the people of Divine Nation. After saying that, she turned to Yunyao and said in a dignified voice, Yunyao, I know that you and Divine Official Luo are good friends. She self-detonated and died. You must be sad. But since things have come to this, it's useless to be sad. The most important thing now is to recover from your injuries and refine the divine orb to increase your strength. Only when you are strong enough to kill the great demon saint and avenge Luoli will she be able to rest in peace. You are the Divine Master's most valued Divine Lady and the future sovereign of Divine Nation. I believe that you will be able to suppress your pain, pull yourself together, and take revenge for Luoli. Yunyao nodded and said in a firm voice, Granny, don't worry. In this life, Yunyao swears to kill the great demon saint. I will avenge Luoli and appease her soul in heaven. Granny Long also nodded and said, all right, go to the secret room to heal your injuries and refine the divine orb as soon as possible. I still have something to say to Tianqing alone. Yunyao looked at her and vaguely guessed her intention. However, Yunyao didn't say anything. She just nodded and went to the secret room to cultivate. Only Granny Long and Ji Tianqing were left in the room. Ji Tianqing then said, Granny Long, don't worry. Luoli died to protect me and Yunyao. I will definitely kill the great demon saint and avenge her. Granny Long shook her head and said in a heavy voice, Tianqing, it's enough that you and Yunyao have such intentions. Divine official Luo won't blame you. However, the great demon saint is extremely strong and is the strongest expert of the demon clan. Even divine official Luo wasn't his opponent. You and Yunyao, sigh. Then, she shook her head and sighed, comforting them, I just wanted to encourage Yunyao. I didn't really ask her to avenge Luoli. You too, just focus on cultivating and increasing your strength as soon as possible. As for killing the great demon saint and avenging Luoli, you don't have to worry about it for now. The Divine Master will arrange it. Obviously, Granny Long didn't think that Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had the ability to avenge Luoli. They were too young and only had the strength of the crossing tribulation realm. However, the great demon saint was the strongest expert of the demon clan, the expert closest to the deity realm. How could it be easy for them to take revenge? It would take at least a few hundred years to achieve it, right? Ji Tianqing understood what Granny Long meant, but he couldn't refute it. It was useless to say anything now. It would be better to kill the great demon saint himself in the future. After a moment of silence, he asked, Granny, I'm afraid you didn't ask me to stay here alone to talk about this, right? Is there any change in the situation of the northern border? Granny Long looked at him deeply and nodded, that's right. I can't hide anything from you. The situation of the northern border has reached the point where it could collapse at any time. Chapter 2044. What? The Northern Territory has fallen. Ji Tianqing turned pale with fright, revealing a look of disbelief. He never thought that in just a year of not paying attention to the situation in the Northern Territory, the situation would deteriorate to such an extent. Granny Long nodded with a solemn face and sighed heavily. The Northern Territory's 4 great empires, a total of 27 regions, have all been captured by the demons. Over the past 2 years, the demons have invested 50 million soldiers, persistently attacking the Northern Territory. Even though we have mobilized the forces of the great empires, conscripting 80 million soldiers, we still couldn't stop the demons' advance. More than 20 million soldiers died on the battlefield, and more than 300 million civilians died tragically under the demon's butcher's knife. More than 600 million civilians were persecuted by the flames of war, displaced and homeless, although the 27 regions that have fallen are not even 1/10 of Scandinavia's territory. But this is a fatal blow to Scandinavia's morale. Now, the entire Scandinavia is in a state of panic, the morale of the army is unstable, and the people are in turmoil. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing's mood became even heavier. His fists in his sleeves were clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. Damn it! Although these things were just empty numbers from Granny Long's mouth. But he had fought with the demons for many years, of course, he could imagine what kind of tragic disaster it would be. It would definitely be a scene of blood flowing and bones piling up like a mountain, a scene as tragic as hell. He couldn't help but recall the scene of him fighting against the demon race's army in the Central Plains. In his mind, many tragic and bloody scenes appeared. Thick anger and killing intent made him want to rush to the battlefield immediately, personally participate in the battle, and kill the demon's army. Granny Long was silent for a while, and seeing his strange expression, she said in a heavy tone, "Tianqing, this old woman knows what you are thinking. To be honest, this old woman can feel your anger and pain, and can't help but want to rush to the battlefield and kill the demons. But this old woman has a heavy responsibility, and also has to protect Luotian Mountain for the Divine Master. If this old woman leaves, Luotian Mountain will be in chaos, and the people's hearts will be even more scattered." Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Granny Long, you have to guard Luotian Mountain. Naturally, you can't rush to the battlefield and slay the fiend. But I'm different. I can personally go to the north to participate in the war and contribute to the protection of the God Nation." Granny Long revealed a gratified expression and nodded slightly. "Tianqing, you mentioned several times before that you wanted to go to the north to participate in the war, but this old one refused. But it's different now. You've already grown into an overlord. Even the dispirited pillar of heaven's mountains could be revived and restored to its former glory. This old one believes that you are already capable of shouldering heavy responsibilities by yourself. Over the past 2 years, I, the elders, and the generals of the various empires have tried all kinds of methods to deal with the demon race. Unfortunately, the demons were too powerful and treacherous. At this point, we are at our wits' end and can only use human lives to fill the gap, using the flesh and blood of our soldiers to build a defensive line to resist the advance of the demon race. If you can participate in the war, with your strength, stratagems, and methods, even if you can't repel the demon race's army, you can at least delay their advance." Ji Tianqing was about to agree, but Granny Long waved her hand to stop him. She said solemnly, "Tianqing, it's reasonable to say that you and Yunyao need to rest the most now. You have already left Luotian Mountain to take charge of Pillar of Heaven's mountains. This old one has no qualifications to ask you to fight for the Luotian God Nation. But this old one has no other choice. I can only shamelessly ask you. I hope that for the sake of our past friendship." As she spoke, Granny Long bent her waist and bowed deeply to him. Ji Tianqing's body shook and he quickly reached out to help her up. "Granny, what are you doing? Please get up quickly. I, Ji Tianqing, am not an ungrateful person. I will never forget the kindness of Luotian Mountain and the God Lord. Even if you don't ask me, I will also go to the north to participate in the war and kill the demons. This is not only for the God Nation's citizens, but also for me, for Yunyao and Luo Li." Granny Long was deeply comforted. Her eyes were slightly red as she said solemnly, "Tianqing, this old one sincerely thanks you on behalf of the God Lord and the God Nation's citizens for your kindness." Ji Tianqing hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Granny, you're exaggerating. This is my duty in the first place. Don't worry, I will rest today and prepare. We will set off early tomorrow morning." Without waiting for him to finish, Granny Long shook her head and said, "No. You can't rush. This old one sees that your cultivation is full and your soul is surging. There seems to be signs of a breakthrough. You must go into seclusion in Luotian Mountain for a period of time. After you have broken through, you can go to the north. Moreover, this old one has to report the news to the God Lord and wait for his decision." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "Granny is indeed wise. To tell you the truth, I have reached the peak of the 8th stage and am about to welcome the 9th heavenly tribulation. Just yesterday, I had a premonition that the heavenly tribulation is about to descend." Granny Long was instantly filled with shock as her eyes widened in disbelief. "What? You are about to break through to the 9th stage of the crossing tribulation realm? Heavens! It has only been 2.5 years and you have consecutively passed through 6 heavenly tribulations. This is simply unprecedented, an unimaginable miracle. Granny Long had lived for 2,000 years and could be said to be knowledgeable. She knew countless legends from the past to the present. But she had never heard of such an abnormal genius like Ji Tianqing. After a long time, her emotions calmed down and said with a gratified face, "No wonder you can control the pillar of heaven's mountain and control the overall situation. Since this is the case, this old one is even more relieved. When you break through to the 9th stage of the crossing tribulation realm and head to the north, you will definitely be able to give the devil race a head-on blow. Alright, this old one will not delay your time. Quickly go and cultivate and prepare for the heavenly tribulation." After saying that, Granny Long bid farewell and left. Ji Tianqing also prepared for a while and entered the secret chamber to cultivate. After leaving the Cloud Water Palace, Granny Long returned to the Cloud Dragon Palace. She entered the secret chamber and walked to a simple and elegant table. On the table, there was an exquisite and gorgeous diamond-shaped gem. Granny Long cast a spell solemnly and injected her magic power into the diamond-shaped gem. Suddenly, the diamond-shaped gem lit up with white light and formed a wide light screen in midair. A woman in a blue dress with an elegant temperament and a noble appearance appeared on the white light screen. This woman seemed to be in her 20s. Her face was beautiful, her eyes were like stars, and her temperament was like a goddess from the 9 heavens. Without a doubt, she was the ruler of the Luoshui divine kingdom, the Luoshui martial god. Of course, this was not the true body of the Luoshui martial god. It was just a projection of her avatar. "Granny Long, what's the matter?" The Luoshui martial god looked at Granny Long calmly and asked. Chapter 2045. What? Even though Luoshui martial god had an elegant temperament and was as calm as autumn water. When she heard the news of Luo Li's death, her expression changed and she frowned. "Luo Li, she passed away. Granny Long, what's going on?" Luoshui martial god's expression was solemn and his eyes were filled with pain. Granny Long hurriedly recounted what had happened in detail. After Luoshui martial god finished listening, his face was as cold as ice and his eyes were filled with cold killing intent. Even the lofty Luoshui martial god was infuriated. After all, she was the one who raised Luo Li and taught her. Not only was Luo Li her most trusted god official, but she was also her most trusted right-hand woman. Luoshui martial god treated her like her own daughter and had high hopes for her. Granny Long saw Luoshui martial god's ugly expression and comforted him, "God Master, please restrain your grief and don't be too worried." God official Luo Li was loyal her entire life and didn't hesitate to die in order to follow the God's orders. It's the blessing of the God Kingdom's people for God Master to have such a trusted general and God Kingdom to have such a loyal minister. Luoshui martial God was silent for a long time before he gradually suppressed his anger and said in a cold voice, "This God originally wanted Yun Yao and Luo Li and poured my efforts into them. This God only hoped that Luo Li could assist Yun Yao in ascending to the God throne and take control of Luoshui God Kingdom. I didn't expect that Luo Li would die before this God's wish was fulfilled. Luoshui God Kingdom and North Underworld Mountain are irreconcilable. This God will not sit by and watch this blood feud. I will personally go and flatten North Underworld Mountain. I will avenge Luo Li and comfort her soul in heaven." Granny Long's expression changed and she quickly dissuaded him, "God Master, you can't do that. North Underworld Mountain is dangerous and is a nest that the demon race carefully built for 30,000 years. Almost no one can enter the hinterland. Moreover, you are in seclusion and comprehending a divine technique. You will be able to break through within 100 years and become the leader of the 3 martial gods. You can't destroy 300 years of hard work just because of a moment of anger." Luoshui martial god had been in seclusion for 300 years. His closed-door cultivation this time went very smoothly, and his strength was also constantly improving. Just as Granny Long had said, after 100 years, Luoshui martial god would achieve another breakthrough. By then, her strength would surpass the two martial gods, Tianjue and Taihao, and she would become the leader of the martial gods. But now, Luo Li's death caused her to be filled with grief and indignation. She actually wanted to come out of seclusion and go to the northern underworld mountain for revenge. Once he forcefully ended his cultivation, the previous 300 years of hard work would be completely destroyed. Granny Long tried to dissuade him. Luo Shui martial god shook his head and explained, "Granny Long, don't worry. I'm at a critical moment in my cultivation. I won't come out of seclusion." Hearing her say that, Granny Long felt a little relieved. After thinking for a while, she was enlightened and said, "I understand now. Divine Lord, you want to send a clone to the North Underworld Mountain to kill the great demon saint and avenge divine official Luo?" Luo Shui martial god nodded slightly and said seriously, "That's right. I haven't shown my face for 300 years. I'm afraid the world has already forgotten my heaven-defying methods. Now that the demon race is invading and the great demon saint killed Luo Li, if I don't take action, what prestige do I have left? I'll send a divine soul clone to kill my way into the North Underworld Mountain. Not only will I kill the great demon saint, I'll also destroy the North Underworld Palace." Luo Shui martial god's tone was cold, and his voice was sonorous and unquestionable. Granny Long immediately bowed and cupped her hands. "Divine Lord is wise. I wish Divine Lord victory and destroy the North Underworld Palace in one go." Luo Shui martial god didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Her figure soon disappeared in the white light screen. A moment later, the white light screen also dissipated. Granny Long was stunned for a moment. A gratified smile appeared on her face as she muttered to herself, "Luo Li, Divine Lord has personally avenged you. If you're in heaven, you should rest in peace." In the next few days, Luo Shui Mountain regained its peace. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were cultivating in seclusion in a secret room. Yun Yao was busy refining the Earth Spirit Divine Pearl, while Ji Tianqing was consolidating his martial Tao and preparing for the 9th heavenly tribulation. Granny Long was as busy as ever. She had to preside over the overall situation of Luo Shui Mountain and worry about the war in the north. The disciples of Luo Shui Mountain were also cultivating day and night to increase their strength. When the time was right, they would rush to the battlefield to kill the demon race and shed blood for the Luo Shui divine kingdom. At the same time, the North Underworld Mountain that had just calmed down was stirred up again. Previously, Ji Tianqing and the others barged into North Underworld Mountain and slaughtered the entire demon race tribe. They were even surrounded by the great demon saint. The news had already spread in North Underworld Mountain, causing billions of demons to discuss it. Now that it had been more than a month, it finally calmed down. But on this evening, an uninvited guest appeared in the sky above Saint Devil City. Whoosh! A crack suddenly appeared in the sky tens of thousands of feet above the ground. A dark golden divine light lit up like a setting sun. An icy blue figure flew out of the giant crack. This figure was a young woman with a graceful figure, elegant and holy, and a cold aura. She wore an icy blue dress, and her hair was tied up in a noble and dignified bun. She wore a simple but not simple jade crown and hairpin. If this was the human world, the people would definitely bow and worship her. They would think that a goddess of the 9 heavens had descended to the mortal world. After all, her appearance and aura were no different from that of a god. She was one of martial god Luo Shui's divine soul avatars. The setting sun was as red as blood, illuminating heaven and earth. However, it couldn't pierce through the layers of dark clouds above Saint Devil City. Saint Devil City was the most sacred and prosperous city in North Underworld Mountain. This was the sacred land of North Underworld Mountain. North of the city was the divine mountain where North Underworld Palace was located. The city was situated on a plain surrounded by mountains. It had a radius of 200 miles, and there were more than 2 million demons living in it. Giant black stone walls that were hundreds of miles long formed a circle around the city, protecting it. The city was flourishing and prosperous, and there were a myriad of buildings and palaces within it. Towering towers stood like trees in a forest, and there were row upon row of residences that were innumerable. All the buildings were built with black, brown, and gray rocks. All the buildings retained their ancient style. One could vaguely see the shadows of the ancient demon race's buildings. Giant statues of demons and asuras stood at the top of many tall towers, buildings, and palaces. They looked solemn and mysterious. At this moment, Luo Shui was standing high in the sky, looking down at Saint Devil City. Saint Devil City was bustling with people. Lanterns were lit, and it was a lively scene. However, some experts noticed something strange. They saw the sky crack and the golden light burst out with their own eyes. Immediately, those experts shouted loudly and spread the news. Chapter 2046. The entire Saint Devil City was in an uproar. Tens of thousands of demons looked up at the sky, loudly discussing and shouting. "Everyone, look! There's someone in the sky. There was a golden light just now. The sky seems to have split open. I saw it too. There's indeed someone standing in the sky, and it seems to be a human woman. That's a human expert. A strong enemy has invaded. What are you all standing there for? Quickly report to the city guard. Ha ha ha. Who dares to trespass into our holy city? They must be tired of living. I bet that in less than 10 breaths of time, that human woman will be killed by the second demon lord and eaten as dinner. Of course. The second demon lord is in charge of the city guard and the city guard. He has the most violent temperament. Any foreign race that falls into his hands will become his meal. Look, the second demon lord has indeed made his move. Just as the demons were discussing, a bloody light shot into the sky from the plaza in the center of the city. The dark red light soared into the sky, heading straight for the Luo Shui clone. Within that bloody light was a monster the size of a mountain of flesh. It had a shockingly round body and 4 short, thick limbs. Probably because its body was too fat and huge, its body was covered in dark red sarcomas. It looked extremely sinister and terrifying. It had a round head on top of its 10 feet tall body. It had a wide, bloody mouth, and a pair of small eyes stared at the Luo Shui clone, flashing with a savage and bloodthirsty light. Without a doubt, this disgusting and ugly monster was the second of the 36 demon lords, the infamous second demon lord. At the same time, it was the commander of the city guard and the city guard, in charge of the safety of the holy city. Behind it were 4 city guard captains, all of them second and third level tribulation transcendence experts. In just 2 breaths of time, the dark red light flew into the sky and arrived in front of the Luo Shui clone. The 2 sides were separated by 10,000 feet, facing each other in the sky. Ha ha ha. This lord has been bored for a long time. I didn't expect that a human woman would take the initiative to deliver herself to me today. Such fresh and tender flesh, blood and soul incomparably pure. It's definitely a delicious meal that's hard to come by in 100 years. The second demon monarch stared greedily at the Luo Shui doppelganger and laughed in satisfaction. Black saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth. The 4 captains of the city guard army also had sinister smiles on their faces, their bodies surging with murderous intent. In Saint Devil City, countless devils looked up at the sky, staring at the second demon monarch and the Luo Shui clone, waiting for a good show. Everyone was certain that the human woman was dead meat. Thinking that the tender human girl was about to be torn into pieces and eaten by the second demon king, people couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. A brutal aura surged in their hearts. However, the scene in the next moment made everyone dumbfounded. The Luo Shui doppelganger looked at the second demon lord expressionlessly. Without saying a word, it raised its right palm and shot out a dazzling stream of icy blue light. Shwa! That icy blue flowing light was like a fire that covered the sky. It was also like a meteor that streaked across the sky and engulfed the second demon monarch and the 4 city guard captains. Although the second demon monarch was a powerhouse in the 8th stage of the crossing tribulation realm, the strength of the 4 city guard captains was not ordinary. But the 5 powerhouses were caught off guard and did not even have the chance to dodge. Boom! With a muffled sound, the bodies of the second demon monarch and the 4 city guard captains instantly collapsed, turning into fragments that fell from the sky. Even their souls were torn apart and destroyed on the spot. The Luo Shui doppelganger had actually killed 5 crossing tribulation realm powerhouses with a casual palm strike. The entire process was understated, without the slightest trace of smoke or fire. It was simply elegant and otherworldly, like the work of an immortal. In Saint Devil City, countless devils witnessed it with their own eyes. All of them were dumbfounded, their bodies stiffened on the spot. Everyone was dumbfounded. No one could believe that the human woman had such terrifying power. However, this was only the beginning of the disaster. The icy blue flowing light's power did not decrease at all. It poured into Saint Devil City like a flood. Rumble. With an earth-shattering sound, countless houses and buildings were engulfed by the icy blue flowing light. In an area of 5 kilometers, tens of thousands of houses and palaces were immediately covered by an icy blue sea of fire. A huge pit appeared in the ground, and a wide ravine split open. Tens of thousands of houses and buildings were reduced to ashes in the sea of fire, reduced to ruins. Tens of thousands of devil martial artists and commoners were also burned to ashes by the icy blue sea of fire, no longer existing. Such a terrifying scene, with its world-destroying momentum, immediately awakened the entire Saint Devil City. All kinds of screams, shouts, angry curses, and roars converged into an earth-shattering sound wave that exploded in the sky above the city. Thousands of devil experts and armored city guards soared into the sky with murderous intent, wanting to besiege the Luo Shui doppelganger. However, before the thousands of experts could fly into the sky, the Luo Shui doppelganger waved her slender hand again, sprinkling down an icy blue flowing light. Water moon clear sky. The icy blue splendor that was dozens of kilometers long fell from the sky like a crescent moon. Instantly, the icy blue crescent moon released a torrential flood that poured into Saint Devil City. More than half of Saint Devil City was submerged in the icy blue flood. The icy blue divine water was bone-chilling and quickly turned into extreme ice. Hundreds of thousands of houses and buildings, and millions of devil martial artists and commoners were all sealed in the extreme ice. The sturdy stone houses and palaces were all frozen to dust, and the ground also cracked open. 90% of the devils below the tribulation transcending realm were immediately frozen to death, all of them turned into ice crystals. Only the tribulation transcending realm experts were able to resist the power of the extreme ice. After suffering heavy injuries, they bitterly held on. In an instant, half of the originally bustling Saint Devil City was turned into a ghost town. More than 1 million devil martial artists and commoners were killed by the Luo Shui doppelganger's divine technique, their bodies and souls turned to dust. Many of the devils died in an instant, not feeling any pain at all. Sealed in ice crystals, they still retained their expressions and movements from the last moment of their lives. Many people looked up at the sky, their eyes and faces filled with fear. Such a horrifying scene scared all the devils out of their wits. The surviving experts of the demon clan immediately realized that the human woman in the blue dress must be a divine transcendence expert. At the very least, she was a peak martial saint. Only a peak martial saint could release such a terrifying power, destroying half of Saint Devil City in one move and slaughtering millions of devils. Saint Devil City was instantly thrown into chaos. In the other half of the city, the millions of devils were horrified, fleeing out of the city in panic. All kinds of cries, curses, and roars mixed together, resounding through the sky. Countless devils fled through the streets and alleys, speeding through the sky, fleeing to the north of the city. As long as they crossed a few mountains and fled to the north, they would be able to reach the foot of the divine mountain. Chapter 2047. However, Luo Xue's clone came with a monstrous hatred. She had made up her mind to destroy Saint Devil City and flatten Baiming Palace to avenge Luo Li. How could she let those millions of demons go? Heavenly River overturn. Luo Xue's clone looked down at Saint Devil City expressionlessly. Looking at the millions of demons that were fleeing in panic, her eyes were extremely cold, without the slightest bit of pity. She gave a low shout and raised her hands to form a seal, using another divine technique. Suddenly, thousands of silver lights lit up in the sky. That was the endless power of the stars, gathered by Luo Xue's divine technique. Swish! 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 After a few breaths, thousands of silver lights gathered together, forming an indomitable starry river that was hundreds of miles wide. The silver-white starry river was like a huge waterfall, descending from the depths of the starry sky and falling toward Saint Devil City. In the 1,000-mile-long starry river, there was an endless amount of starry divine fire, enough to burn everything. Boom! With a deafening muffled sound, the starry river fiercely hit Saint Devil City. Instantly, the surging star divine fire spread out like a torrential flood, drowning the other half of Saint Devil City. In the area of hundreds of miles, hundreds of thousands of buildings and millions of demons were all floating in the sea of starry fire, desperately struggling. No matter how sturdy the buildings were, even if they were protected by demon Dao arrays, they were all burned by the starry divine fire, turning into ruins and dust. All the demons below the crossing calamity realm were burned to ashes, leaving only black ashes scattered in the ruins. Not only were their physical bodies destroyed, even their souls were annihilated in the sea of starry fire. What a scene of destruction! In just 10 breaths, millions of demons and martial artists were annihilated in the sea of starry fire. Only a few tens of thousands of people who were stronger or had magical treasures to protect themselves were lucky enough to survive. Of course, these survivors were also heavily injured, fleeing Saint Devil City in a sorry state, fleeing towards the north. Not long after, the sea of starry fire and Luo Xue's extreme ice gradually dissipated. Saint Devil City returned to peace. The calamity that destroyed the world was finally over. However, Saint Devil City was also destroyed, turning into ruins with a radius of 200 miles. The earth cracked, filled with ravines and deep pits. Not a single intact building or palace could be found among the ruins. There were dilapidated walls everywhere, and the ground was covered in debris and black ash. Anyone who saw this scene would find it hard to believe that this used to be the most prosperous Saint Devil City in the North Underworld Mountains. This ancient and sacred city with 10,000 years of history was destroyed just like that. Of the more than 2 million demon civilians and martial artists, only a few 100,000 remained. They fled miserably toward the northern divine mountain. Of course, there were more than 1,000 tribulation transcendence experts guarding Saint Devil City. There was also a demon saint and 6 demon monarchs. The Luo Xue clone only used 20 breaths of time to execute 2 divine techniques and completely destroy Saint Devil City. This was something that no one had expected. The demon saint and the 6 demon monarchs were shocked, terrified, and furious. Hundreds of thousands of heavily injured devil race elites had fled the Saint Devil City. However, this demon saint and the 6 demon monarchs were too ashamed to escape. They could only stay and fly high up in the sky, surrounding the Luo Xue clone. The demon saint leading the group was the new demon saint who had just broken through to the martial sage realm a few months ago, Qian Ren. This person was 30 feet tall and his body was thin. His bones and flesh were like firewood, and he looked like a black demon wolf. However, there were 4 pairs of wings on his back. The black wings shone with a cold light, and his body exuded an extremely sharp aura. He stood in the sky, 10 miles away from the Luo Xue clone, and they faced each other from afar. The other 6 demon monarchs were all of different sizes and had strange appearances. Each of them had their own talents and skills. The group formed a circle, holding weapons, and glared at the Luo Shui clone with hatred in their eyes. Demon Saint Qianren frowned and glared at the Luo Shui clone. He asked in a low voice, "You bitch, what grudge do you have with my tribe? How could you be so cruel and vicious? You destroyed the entire Saint Devil City and killed 2 million of my people. You are infuriating. Tell me, who are you and why did you do this?" In fact, Demon Saint Qianren had guessed that the Luo Shui clone was related to the Luo Shui kingdom. He was just saying this on purpose to stall for time. After all, the Luo Shui clone was much stronger than an ordinary martial saint. He was definitely not her match. He could only wait for the experts in Baiming Palace to come to his aid. The Luo Shui clone slowly turned her head and looked at him coldly. She said in a cold voice, "I killed 2 million demon clan members. Am I cruel and vicious and infuriating? Your demon clan invaded the Luo Shui kingdom and killed 300 million people, causing 700 million people to be homeless. What kind of behavior is this? It is cruel and bloodthirsty to the extreme. It is so vicious that it makes one's hair stand on end. Even heaven and earth will not tolerate it." As he spoke, the Luo Shui clone naturally exuded a soaring hatred and killing intent, forming an invisible pressure that enveloped the area within a radius of 100 li. Demon Saint Qianren and the 6 demon monarchs were shocked by her pressure, and their hearts were filled with respect. However, Demon Saint Qianren did not panic. He did not show any fear or worry. He looked at the Luo Shui clone and sneered disdainfully, "I see. I did not guess wrongly. You are really from the Luo Shui kingdom. Ha ha ha. The people of the Luo Shui kingdom are all weak and useless insects. They do not have the right to occupy the vast land in the east of the continent. So what if my army has invaded and killed a few 100 million people? This is only the beginning. Sooner or later, my warriors will kill all the people of the Luo Shui kingdom and occupy the entire Luo Shui kingdom. Of course, you will not be able to see that day. Because today, you will definitely die." Demon Saint Qianren had already sensed that in Baiming Palace, which was 1,000 miles away, there was a strong demonic aura. 2 incomparably powerful auras were rushing over at the fastest speed. Therefore, he had the confidence to be so confident. How could Luo Shui not see through Demon Saint Qianren's intentions? "Humph, do you think that the great demon saint can save you? Wishful thinking. The reason why I am talking to you is because I am waiting for him to come and die." As she spoke, the Luo Shui clone raised her hands again. Her 10 fingers formed a seal and instantly, dozens of icy blue sword lights shot out. Swish! 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 The more than 90 icy blue sword lights were like icicles. They were bone-chilling and extremely sharp. The numerous sword lights shot out in all directions like a blossoming ice flower. It was extremely beautiful. Demon Saint Qianren saw that the situation was not good. He instinctively teleported to dodge, but he was still stabbed by a sword light. A deep wound was left on his waist. The 6 demon monarchs were shocked. They wanted to escape, but it was too late. Chapter 2048. The 6 demon lords were lucky enough to survive. However, they were severely injured. Their bodies were drenched in blood and they looked miserable. Demon Saint Thousandren frowned. His eyes were filled with worry. He was worried that he and the 6 demon lords would not be able to hold on until reinforcements arrived. "All of you, brace yourselves for this sage. Everyone, let's work together and set up the ancient demon 6 directions array. We must trap her." Demon Saint Thousandren ordered. He took the lead to cast a spell and cast a blood-red light that covered the sky towards Luo Shui's clone. The 6 demon monarchs disregarded their injuries and spread out into a formation, casting spells to form a demon Dao grand array. The blood-red light that covered the sky, the surging demon Qi, and the shadows of various spells immediately engulfed Luo Shui's clone. A saint-level array was quickly forming. It covered a radius of 200 miles. Demon Saint Thousand Ren knew that it would take at least a few hours to complete the array. He did not dare to hope that he could trap her for a few hours. He only hoped that he could delay her for half an hour. However, he soon realized that this was just wishful thinking. Luo Shui's clone looked around expressionlessly. Looking at the blood-red light that covered the sky, a cold glint flashed across her eyes. She did not say a word. She raised her hands and cast a spell. Dozens of icy blue light blades shot out. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. More than 60 icy blue light blades formed an extraordinary sword array. They pierced forward as fast as lightning. With a loud boom boom boom, the bloody light barrier that had just been condensed was immediately shattered into pieces by the icy blue light blade. A huge gap appeared. Luo Shui's clone moved gracefully. In a flash, she stepped through the gap and appeared in the sky 15 miles away. At the same time, the sword array formed by the icy blue light blades struck two demon lords. The two demon lords did not have the chance to dodge. They were immediately turned into dust by the light blades. Luo Shui's clone took another step and teleported 15 miles away. She suddenly appeared behind another demon lord. She raised her slender white hand and struck the demon lord with her palm. Bam! Before this demon monarch could react, his body shattered into pieces with a bang, and even his soul was destroyed. Following that, Luo Shui's clone continued to teleport. Within 2 breaths, the remaining 3 demon monarchs were instantly killed. The 6 demon monarchs had all been reduced to ashes, and the demon Dao holy array that had yet to be formed naturally vanished. The Thousand Devil Saint was completely terrified. He no longer dared to continue fighting and fled to the north in a panic. At this moment, he no longer dared to hope that he could block the attack of the Luo Shui clone. He only hoped to shake off the pursuit and safely return to Baiming Palace. Shua! The Thousand Ren Demon Saint turned into a streak of crimson light and sped towards the north at lightning speed. His figure flickered continuously in the sky. However, he had only flown 200 miles when he was caught up by the Luo water clone. Shua! The Luo water clone took light steps forward, her posture graceful and calm. Every step she took brought her several dozen li away. In just 7 steps, she had caught up with the Thousand Ren Demon Saint. She raised her right hand and struck him with her palm. In her slender and tender palm, the star fire surged violently and formed a wide silver light blade. It slashed towards the Thousand Ren Demon Saint like a guillotine. The Thousand Ren Demon Saint sensed the impending danger. He instantly felt a chill down his spine and his soul almost left his body. He turned around without hesitation and cast a spell to form a crimson light shield in an attempt to block the attack. Bam! With a muffled explosion, the star light blade shattered the crimson light and struck the Thousand Ren Demon Saint. He was sent flying on the spot. Blood spurted from his body as he tumbled towards the north. After flying for 50 li, he managed to neutralize the impact and stabilized his body. He looked down and saw a 2-foot-long wound on his chest. It was so deep that his bones could be seen. His robes and soft armor had been torn open, rolling outwards like his flesh. Dark purple demon blood flowed out from the wound and sprinkled in the sky. The excruciating pain continued to assault the Thousand Ren Demon Saint, causing him to break out in cold sweat. However, he did not dare to hesitate or treat his wound. He continued to flee towards the north with all his might. After 3 breaths, he finally crossed a towering mountain range and flew over a valley. He was already halfway there. He was still 500 li away from Baiming Palace. Before the Thousand Ren Demon Saint could heave a sigh of relief, an icy blue stream of light attacked him from behind. It caused him to feel fear from the depths of his soul. Swoosh! The icy blue stream of light streaked across the sky and engulfed the 1,000-ren demon saint. His flesh and blood were frozen stiff. He could not circulate his demon chi smoothly and his flying speed was reduced by half. Bam! Another 1,000 feet long ice sword slashed down and instantly cut off his pair of wings. The black wings shattered into pieces. Dark purple demon blood spurted out and sprinkled in the sky. The 1,000-ren demon saint let out a shrill cry and continued to flee towards the north. After crossing the valley, he flew over a towering mountain peak that was 10,000 feet tall. In front of him was a dark brown wasteland. Hundreds of thousands of heavily injured demon race elites were flying above the wasteland. They looked towards the north as if their lives depended on it. With so many demons gathered together, it was like a black flood. At the end of the wasteland was a towering mountain that was 10,000 feet tall. Everything below the mountainside of the giant mountain was pitch black. However, everything above the mountainside was dark red in color. It was extremely eerie. Boundless black clouds and demon chi shrouded the entire mountain and covered the vast wasteland. Without a doubt, the majestic mountain was the divine mountain where the ancestral demon gods and demon saints resided. The famous Beiming Palace was located on that divine mountain. Finally, he saw the divine mountain. The 1,000-ren demon saint was excited. He endured his injuries and sped up. However, just as he was flying above the wasteland, another wave of blade light and sword shadows came down from behind him. Swish 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 swish. The Lua water clone was waving its arms and releasing icy light that covered the sky. It formed millions of light blades and bombarded the entire wasteland. The 1,000-ren demon saint did not dare to be careless. He could only take out a shield and cast a spell to enlarge it to protect himself. Countless icy light and sword shadows bombarded the shield, causing it to tremble. Bloody light and black demon chi burst out. The 1,000-ren demon saint had a dharma treasure to protect himself. He was temporarily safe. However, the hundreds of thousands of demons in the wasteland were instantly killed. Bam 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 bam. Endless muffled sounds rang out continuously, one after another. Batch after batch of demon race elites fell like wheat being cut down. They were killed and turned into dregs. The dark brown wasteland was also filled with holes from the impact of the blade light and sword shadows. Sand and dust filled the air. It was a chaotic scene. It was as if doomsday had arrived. After 10 breaths of time, the millions of icy light and sword shadows finally dissipated. The wasteland in a radius of 300 miles had long been turned into ruins filled with holes and ravines. Tens of thousands of demon race elites had been turned into flesh and blood and scattered on the wasteland. The dark brown earth and soil were also dyed with a layer of dark purple. The tens of thousands of demon race elites who were lucky enough to survive were also horrified. They fled in all directions. The 1,000-ren demon saint was lucky enough to survive. He flew toward the divine mountain in a panic. Chapter 2049. Swoosh! 2 gigantic palms that covered the sky descended from the heavens like the hands of a god. Everything within a radius of 10 miles was covered by the palms. The air was also compressed and turned into a vacuum zone. Even the space was sealed by a formless force. The 1,000-ren demon saint wanted to teleport away, but he was unable to do so. No. At the moment of life and death, the 1,000-ren demon saint looked up at the gigantic palms in the sky and let out a furious roar. His voice was filled with unwillingness. 200 miles away, at the end of the wasteland, a dazzling blood-red light shone. The blood-red light sped over and wrapped around 2 figures. They were both martial sages of the demon Tao. Stop! How dare you! How dare you! The 2 demon sages had just received news of the enemy's invasion and destruction of Saint Devil City. They had rushed over to help. However, they had just flown down from the godly mountain when they saw this scene in the sky above the wasteland. The two of them were filled with rage and could not help but shout. The Thousand-Ren demon saint also saw the two demon sages and was overjoyed. He shouted, "Great demon saint, third demon saint, save me." Without a doubt, the two demon sages that were flying over were the great demon saint and the third demon saint. However, it was a pity that they were too far away. Even if they wanted to save him, they were too far away. The two of them could only watch as the two gigantic palms that covered the sky slammed into the Thousand-Ren demon saint. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the Thousand-Ren demon saint's body exploded and turned into tens of thousands of pieces of flesh and blood that splattered in all directions. Dark purple blood mist wrapped around the pieces of flesh and blood and scattered in the sky. A dark purple godly soul flew out from the pieces of flesh and blood and fled toward the godly mountain in a panic. At the same time, the two gigantic icy blue palms did not lose their power and slammed into the wasteland. Rumble! An earth-shattering explosion erupted and shook the universe. The wasteland, which was already in ruins, was immediately smashed into two craters that were hundreds of miles wide. Dirt and rocks flew everywhere. The wasteland was completely destroyed. It was truly earth-shattering. Swoosh! The Luo Shui clone did not give up. Its figure flashed as it chased after the Thousand-Ren demon saint's godly soul. Even though the Thousand Nightmare demonic saint's physical body had been destroyed and only his divine soul was left, the Thousand Nightmare demonic saint was still alive. However, as long as he managed to escape and recuperate in seclusion for 100 years, he would be able to rebuild his body and return to his peak state. Furthermore, Luo Shui knew that the demon race had all sorts of evil secret techniques that could allow the Thousand-Ren demon saint to recover his powers in a short period of time. Therefore, she had to eliminate the source of the problem. If he didn't kill the Thousand Nightmare Devil Saint today, the Thousand Nightmare Devil Saint would be able to slaughter hundreds of thousands of human soldiers on the northern battlefield. In the blink of an eye, the Luo water clone caught up with the Thousand-Ren demon saint's spirit. She conjured a spell with both her hands and waved them rapidly. She unleashed a torrential amount of spiritual energy towards the Thousand-Ren demon saint. Soul-extinguishing fist. The incomparably powerful spiritual energy was originally an intangible thing. Under the support of Luo Shui's secret technique, it actually condensed into a light blue fist light that was the size of a palace. At the same time, the Great Devil Saint and the Third Devil Saint also arrived at the scene. "Damn you, bitch! You are courting death. Today, I will tear you to pieces." The two Devil Saints roared at the same time. They waved their palms and released a powerful amount of spiritual energy towards the Luo water clone. If Luo Shui insisted on killing the Thousand-Ren demon saint and refused to stop, she would also be injured by the two Devil Saints. The two Devil Saints were certain that she would not allow both of them to be injured. She would definitely cast a spell to defend herself. This way, the Thousand-Ren demon saint would be able to escape death. However, what the two Devil Saints did not expect was that the Luo water clone actually ignored their attacks. She stared at the Thousand-Ren demon saint's spiritual energy coldly. She was determined to kill him. Kaboom! The light blue soul-extinguishing fist struck the Thousand-Ren demon saint's spiritual energy with a mighty force. Amidst the thunderous sound, the dark purple spiritual energy was instantly shattered into pieces and scattered across the sky. The newly promoted Devil Saint, Thousand-Ren, had died just like that. Not even his corpse was left behind. He had only enjoyed 2 months of glory. He did not even have the time to go to the battlefield and contribute to the demon race before he died just like that. The Great Devil Saint and the Third Devil Saint witnessed this scene with their own eyes. They were so angry that their eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. Their bodies were burning with murderous flames. In the next moment, the two Devil Saints released their spiritual energy attacks and struck the Luo water clone. Bam! The Luo Shui clone was sent flying backwards, tumbling 100 miles away. Her face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Fresh blood flowed out of her mouth and nose. She was in a sorry state. However, other than that, she was not injured at all. Even though this was only a clone of the Luo Water Martial God. She had used the Luo Water Heavenly Supreme Tao to peel off a strand of her spiritual energy and used her own blood to create this spiritual energy clone. However, this was still a real body made of flesh and blood. It possessed 20% of her strength. Even though she had taken on the combined attacks of the Great Devil Saint and the Third Devil Saint, she was only slightly injured. She was sent flying 50 miles away. She quickly stabilized her body and stood steadily in the sky. Swoosh! A green light flashed across her body. She circulated her energy to suppress the chaotic dermic powers. Her spiritual energy also calmed down. In the blink of an eye, she returned to her original state, and no one could tell that she had been injured. She stood proudly in the sky and looked coldly at the Great Devil Saint. She said in a cold voice, "Great Devil Saint, Ling Xian. You've finally appeared." The Luo Water clone's eyes were fixed on the Great Devil Saint, and she did not even look at the Third Devil Saint. The Third Devil Saint, Li Tua, was an old demon who had been famous for 2,000 years. His original body was an ancient variant descendant of the heaven-devouring blood leech. He was incomparably huge, valiant, and ugly. Normally, he would appear in front of others in his magical form. He was a middle-aged man who was over 3 meters tall and covered in dark red. However, the Luo Water clone had come to Dark North Mountain to avenge Luo Li. Her primary goal was to kill the Great Devil Saint, Ling Xian. Ling Xian stood in the sky and frowned as he looked at the Luo Water clone. His eyes flickered with bewilderment. "Who are you? How do you know my real name?" For 2,000 years, he had only had one title, Dark North Mountain's Great Devil Saint. Regardless of whether it was the demons of Dark North Mountain or the various powerhouses of Shenwu continent, everyone knew that he was the strongest demon. However, no one knew that he was not actually a true demon. He had been born 4,000 years ago, and he was a citizen of the vast divine kingdom. He had been born in an ancient tribe called Shadow. At that time, Shenwu continent had 4 divine kingdoms that existed side by side. There had been endless disputes, and the various tribes had killed each other. The ancient tribe that Ling Xian had been born in had a special innate bloodline that allowed them to grasp rare divine abilities and secret arts. Originally, this ancient tribe had stood aloof from worldly affairs and lived in seclusion. However, the flames of war had spread to this tribe and destroyed its peace and tranquility. A certain empire's army had passed by and discovered the Shadow tribe's innate divine ability. Thus, the empire's army had abducted everyone from the tribe and forced them to join the army and serve the empire. Anyone who resisted had been cruelly killed by the empire's army. The few survivors had no choice but to submit to fate and follow the empire's army. Chapter 2050. On this mainland, every martial saint expert was not simple. All of them had extraordinary experiences or extraordinary backgrounds. As for Ling Xian, he was a peak martial saint and the strongest person in North Underworld Mountain. His life experiences could be said to be legendary. When he was young, his home was destroyed, his parents were all killed, and his entire tribe was destroyed. But he still had to endure the humiliation and be used by his enemies. He fought for the empire and made great contributions. The endless killing and war made him cold-blooded, emotionless, cruel, and numb. At the same time, his bloodline talent was awakened and his strength increased by leaps and bounds. In a short 200 years, he broke through to the martial saint realm and completely awakened his talent and abilities. In the process, he came across a remnant of an ancient demon path secret technique. After cultivating, he realized that the demon path secret technique was very compatible with his talent. They complemented each other and made him a rare genius. The demon path secret technique, the killing and war, and the tragic experiences of his youth made him lose his humanity and fall into the demon path. 300 years later, he killed his enemies with his own hands and slaughtered millions of soldiers. Furthermore, he had single-handedly destroyed that unstable empire and taken revenge for his blood feud. However, his actions had caused public outrage in the divine nation of Taihao, and he had become a devil that everyone wanted to kill. Martial God Vast Divine Kingdom sent out a divine order and sent a large number of divine guards and experts to kill Ling Xian. Ling Xian no longer had a place in the vast divine kingdom. He could only run for his life and leave the vast divine kingdom. During this process, he had gone through many dangerous situations and killed countless powerhouses. Dozens of years later, he finally escaped the pursuit of the vast divine kingdom and hid in the dark and terrifying North Underworld mountain. It was said that at the beginning, he was not accepted by the demon race. After countless battles, he spent 100 years to gain a foothold in North Underworld mountain. In the next 1,000 years, he tried every possible means to find the complete demon path secret technique. After he mastered the technique, he completely turned into a demon. Also, he used 1,000 years to unify thousands of demon race tribes and became the strongest force in North Underworld mountain. From then on, no one remembered his identity or name. Everyone only knew that he was the strongest person in North Underworld mountain, the leader of the 4 great demon saints, the most savage and tyrannical great demon saint. After thousands of years, someone suddenly called out his real name. Moreover, the other party was a young and beautiful human woman. How could Ling Xian not be shocked? His gaze towards the Luo Shui clone was filled with killing intent and fear. The Luo Shui clone's expression remained indifferent as he spoke in an icy tone. Ling Xian, back then, you massacred an army of 1 million and destroyed the entire Xuanya Empire. Have you already forgotten such a heinous crime? Great Demon Saint furrowed his brows, his eyes filled with hatred, but he suddenly grinned coldly. Ha ha ha. So it's about this. Since that's the case, you're the martial saint of the vast divine nation, and you're here to seek revenge. After guessing the identity of the other party, the great demon saint was relieved. He sneered and said, I didn't expect that after thousands of years, Taihao still wouldn't give up on hunting me down. But he's old and muddle-headed. He actually sent a woman to break into the North Underworld mountain to deal with me. Isn't he seeking his own death? After he finished speaking, the Luo Shui clone coldly said, No. You're wrong. This god isn't from the vast divine nation, and I'm not here to settle old scores with you. Great Demon Saint was stunned. He frowned in confusion and asked, Then who are you? The Luo Shui clone coldly said, Luo Li is this god's most valued god official and servant. I've always treated her as my own. And you? You caused her to die tragically in the void and self-destruct. This god has come to the North Underworld mountain this time to avenge her. Great Demon Saint immediately understood her identity. He couldn't help but tremble as his eyes widened in disbelief. Avenge Luo Li. This god? Are you martial god Luo Shui? After he finished speaking, Great Demon Saint suddenly reacted and quickly shook his head in denial. No, that's impossible. Martial god Luo Shui resides high up in the divine nation and has been cultivating in seclusion. How could she come out of seclusion to seek revenge for a servant? Great Demon Saint looked at the Luo Shui clone in shock and said with certainty, Even if you're martial god Luo Shui, you're definitely not her true body. You must be a clone. The Luo Shui clone didn't deny it and coldly said, That's right, this god's clone has arrived. Great Demon Saint let out a sigh of relief and said with a playful sneer, Ha ha ha. Martial god Luo Shui is really confident to look down on the North Underworld mountain. A mere clone dares to barge into my clan's holy city and start a massacre. You even want to seek revenge from this god. It seems that not only will you not be able to take revenge today, but you'll also follow in Luo Li's footsteps and die. The Luo Shui clone wasn't angry and said in a dignified tone, so what if I'm a clone? It's enough to flatten the North Underworld Palace. This god has already destroyed the Saint Devil City. Now, it's time for you to be executed. Then, the Luo Shui clone waved her palms and sent out a blue light that blotted out the sky toward Great Demon Saint and Third Demon Saint. Whoosh! The blue light that blotted out the sky immediately condensed into two hurricanes that were hundreds of miles tall and enveloped the two demon saints. Extreme Ice World Annihilation. The enormous icy blue hurricanes spun at an extreme speed and tried to strangle the two demon saints. The entire wasteland below the holy mountain was enveloped by extreme ice as if it had been sealed in ice. Originally, there were still tens of thousands of demon race experts who had survived. However, they were sealed by the extreme ice and frost, and their bodies were stiff and couldn't move. The demon race experts who were closer to the two demon saints were all enveloped by the icy hurricanes. In the blink of an eye, thousands of demon race experts were ground to dust by the hurricanes. Even Great Demon Saint and Third Demon Saint couldn't escape from the extreme ice hurricanes in a short period of time. The two could only use all their strength to cast spells to resist and dispel the hurricanes. Demon Dragon Protection. Great Sky Demon Protection. Sky-splitting Demon Blade, open for me. The two great devil saints roared furiously as they continued to fight in the ice tornado. A full quarter of an hour passed. Great Demon Saint and Third Demon Saint used all their strength and used a few Demon Dao treasures to defeat the two hurricanes and escape. The icy blue hurricanes that were hundreds of miles tall shattered into ice shards and scattered on the wasteland. Of course, the two demon saints also paid a heavy price. Both of them were covered in wounds and blood, and they looked quite miserable. Luo Shui didn't give them a chance to catch their breath and immediately summoned the Star Divine Fire from outer space to shoot down a dozen meteors. Star Fall Annihilation. More than a dozen huge meteors fell from the sky with dazzling silver flames. Suddenly, the pitch-black demon fog that covered the sky was dispersed by the Star Divine Fire. 1,000 miles around the holy mountain was illuminated by the silver starlight. Chapter 2051. Ordinary martial artists did not even have the right to go to the outer space. No matter how vast the starry sky was, they could only look at it from afar. As for the shooting stars, they were like the wrath of the gods to martial artists below the god realm. Even the great demon Saint Ling Xian and the third demon Saint Ta Tua did not dare to go against them. However, at this critical juncture, the two of them joined forces without hesitation and displayed a powerful defensive secret skill. Demon Sky Sacred Umbrella. The two of them faced each other with their palms pressed against each other. Blood-red light surged out of their bodies and an earth-shattering aura erupted. The demonic chi that was drifting in the heavens and earth from all directions gathered together like a flood. In the blink of an eye, a huge demonic chi shield was formed. The dark red light infused into the black shield and increased the power of the shield by a few times, reaching the limit of the martial sage realm. This half-black, half-red barrier not only protected the two demon sages, but also the tens of thousands of surviving demon race elites. In the next moment, dozens of shooting stars that were as dazzling as the sun descended from the sky. Boom! 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 A series of muffled explosions resounded through the sky and shook the earth. Suddenly, the Silver Star Divine Fire exploded and flooded the entire wasteland like a torrential flood. The area within a 300-mile radius became chaotic and chaotic. The terrifying Star Divine Flame burned the ground into red lava, which flowed freely. Even the holy mountain at the end of the wilderness was affected. Below the mountainside, there were countless ravines and countless rocks collapsed. The godly mountain shook intensely, flashing with a dark red blood-red light and letting out muffled rumbling noises. The heavens and earth were in complete chaos. The protective shield formed by the two great demon saints lasted for 3 breaths of time, blocking the bombardment of the 9 meteors. However, when the 10th shooting star came down, the umbrella-like shield could no longer hold on. With a loud cracking sound, the entire shield fell apart and broke into pieces. When the 11th shooting star came down, the 3rd demon Saint Ta-Tua was hit and fell to the ground with a scream. When the 12th shooting star came down, the great demon Saint Ling Xian was also hit and fell to the ground from the sky. A huge crater was smashed into the ground, and the soil and sand were burned into magma, bursting with monstrous flames. The 13th meteor came crashing down, blasting thousands of demon race elites into smithereens. Even though the falling meteors had come to an end, the disaster was finally over. However, the torrential sea of flame and raging lava were still wreaking havoc in the wasteland. Only a few thousand demon elites remained, fleeing for their lives towards the sacred mountain. However, how could they escape? The star divine fire and blazing lava attacked, immediately drowning everyone. Regardless of whether it was his physical body or his divine soul, both were turned into ashes in the sea of fire, completely annihilated. What an apocalyptic scene! The wasteland within a radius of 300 miles had completely turned into a dark red sea of lava, with flames rising fiercely. Apart from Ling Xian and Ba Tuo who were lucky enough to survive, everyone else perished in the sea of fire, killed by the meteors. Of course, Ling Xian and Ba Tuo had also suffered serious injuries. When the two of them crawled out of the sea of lava, their bodies were already charred like charcoal, covered in pitch-black blood, and they looked extremely wretched. Not only were their physical bodies severely injured, their divine souls were also severely injured, and their strength had decreased by as much as 30%. What a vicious method! Ling Xian stood in the sky, looking down at the sea of lava and fire below, his eyes bulging with anger, almost bursting with blood. Luo Shui. You lowly slave, North Underworld Mountain will not live under the same sky as you. Ba Tuo looked at this scene in a daze, his eyes wide open, filled with fear and disbelief. He could not help but shake his head, murmuring in a low voice, "This is the method of a martial god expert. With a flick of his finger, he can destroy the world." Ba Tuo had never seen a martial god expert attack in his life, so he did not know the powerful methods of a martial god. The strongest person he had ever seen was the great demon Saint Ling Xian. Of course, there was also the ancestor fiend god. Thinking of this, Ba Tuo suddenly came to his senses and hurriedly transmitted his voice, "Great demon saint. This lowly woman has already gone crazy, and we can't stop her. The only thing we can do now is to ask the ancestor to come out of seclusion to kill her." As soon as Ba Tuo finished speaking, Ling Xian flatly refused and shouted angrily, "No. Absolutely not. The ancestor is in seclusion in the Blood Sea Abyss, comprehending the ancient demonic arts, and is about to break through. If we disturb him at this time, he will definitely fail and all his previous efforts will be for naught." Ba Tuo understood this and said worriedly, "But, if we don't ask the ancestor to come out of seclusion, how should we deal with it?" Ling Xian frowned and thought for a moment. His eyes flashed with determination, and he said firmly, "The only thing we can do now is to use the forbidden secret technique to forcefully increase our strength. Also, we can't hide those magic treasures anymore. We must do everything we can to keep this crazy woman busy and not let her destroy a North Underworld palace." Ba Tuo understood his meaning. After a moment of silence, he gritted his teeth and nodded, "All right. We'll do as you say." As soon as he finished speaking, Ba Tuo raised his palms and looked up at the sky, making a gesture of worship. His face was solemn, and blood flames surged out of his body. He shouted in a deep voice, "With my Dharma body, burning blood spirit. Heavenly demon blessing, Azura body." Ba Tuo chanted a long ancient demonic incantation and used all his strength to perform the forbidden secret technique. His blood essence and spiritual power seemed to be boiling, burning with blood-red flames that shot up into the sky. Although this would damage his demonic art's foundation and cause him to lose at least 100 years of cultivation. The technique could only be maintained for 15 minutes. After that, his blood essence would dry up and he would be extremely weak. He would have to recuperate for a few years to recover his strength. However, after performing the burning blood spirit, his combat strength increased by more than 6 times, reaching the limit of the martial sage realm. On the other side, the great demon sage Ling Xian also performed the burning blood spirit. Blood flames surged out of his body and shot up into the sky. His body expanded to 100 feet tall and turned into a huge demon. After burning his blood essence and demonic powers, his strength increased by 6 times. In a short period of time, he had surpassed the martial sage realm and was comparable to an early-stage martial god. Moreover, Ling Xian was a descendant of the ancient Shadow tribe and had a special gift. His huge demonic body was like a blurry shadow, appearing and disappearing. It was very unreal. Obviously, not only did he use the burning blood spirit, he also used the Shadow tribe's gift. Shadow escape. Ling Xian shouted angrily and his body suddenly disappeared into the sky, hiding in the darkness. In the next moment, he suddenly rushed out of the shadows and appeared behind Luo Shui's clone. Dragon-slaying claw. Ling Xian suddenly stretched out his huge claws and grabbed at Luo Shui's clone with a power that could tear everything apart. Luo Shui was already prepared. He immediately turned around and raised his fists to attack. Boom! Chapter 2052. Ling Xian had been sent flying by Luo Shui's punch. However, after flying for 5 kilometers, his body turned into a shadow and strangely disappeared. Luo Shui was about to use his God's Eye to search for Ling Xian's true body. At that moment, Ma Tuo pounced over, wielding a dark red millstone axe in both hands as he swung it down. Sacred demon punishing God. Ma Tuo's entire body surged with blood-red flames, and the simple millstone axe in his hands exuded a divine might that could destroy everything. Such ferocious might was enough to make any martial saint tremble in fear. Aside from martial gods, almost no one could withstand it. After all, the dark red ancient axe in Ma Tuo's hands did not have a simple origin. This axe was called the Heaven's Destroyer, and it was the personal weapon of a demon god from ancient times. That demon god had been a fierce general under the ancestor demon god, and his battle achievements were splendid. He was infamous for his ferocity, and he had killed over 100 gods from various races. The Heaven's Destroyer was even more dangerous, and it was difficult to resist. However, during the ancient War of the Gods, that demon god had been killed by the human race's war god, and he had fallen forever. The Heaven's Destroyer had also been shattered, leaving behind a few cracks that had been left behind on Shenwu continent. The demon axe had been hidden in the abyss for 10,000 years before it finally saw the light of day again, and it had been obtained by a demonic Dao powerhouse. After more than 20,000 years, it had finally landed in Dark North Mountain. 1,000 years ago, Ma Tuo had become the 3rd great demon saint of Dark North Mountain, and he had obtained the Heaven's Destroyer. Although the Heaven's Destroyer had been severely damaged, it could only be considered a top-tier sacred weapon. However, it had once been a divine weapon, and it had possessed a terrifying might. Ma Tuo was reluctant to use it unless it was absolutely necessary. At this moment, Ma Tuo was relying on the burning blood deification technique to swing the Heaven's Destroyer at Luo Shui's clone. He was full of confidence, and he thought that he could force Luo Shui's clone to retreat or even injure her. However, his knowledge was too shallow, and he could not guess how terrifying a martial god powerhouse was. Chaotic explosion. Luo Shui's clone did not use any weapons. Instead, she used her slender hands to continuously wave dazzling light as she used a powerful divine art. Instantly, the sky in a radius of 5 kilometers in front of her twisted and folded, like a crumpled ball of paper. At least 4 layers of space were crushed and kneaded together, forming a light sphere that was 10 miles in radius, and then smashed towards Batuo. Boom! Amidst a deafening explosion, the randomly folded space bomb hit Batuo. Hei Tuo was sent flying backward on the spot. The heaven-slicing war axe also collapsed high into the sky and fell down powerlessly. Not only that, the chaotic and folded power of space was like a sharp blade strangling Batuo. He was strangled until his entire body was dripping with blood and riddled with wounds. He let out a painful shriek. Luo Shui's clone took the opportunity to close in, wanting to kill Matua in one fell swoop. But at this time, the great demon Saint Ling Xian had already gathered his strength and was ready to attack, using a secret technique to attack. Shadow Strike. Following his cold shout, 36 shadows appeared in the sky around Luo Shui, all of them charging towards Luo Shui at the same time. Each shadow was hundreds of meters tall and looked exactly like Ling Xian. Their soul aura and demonic energy fluctuations were also exactly the same. If it were any other martial sage, they would not be able to tell which figure was real and which was fake. But Luo Shui was different. She furrowed her brows, and her pitch-black eyes instantly turned dark gold. It was the Divine Eye secret technique. The 36 shadows changed their appearance in her eyes, their disguises immediately torn off. Humph. You do have some skill. You actually have 12 real bodies and 24 illusions. Generally speaking, a secret technique like the shadow strike was a smokescreen. Most of the shadows were fake. Only one shadow was real. But Ling Xian's talent was extraordinary, and he actually had 12 real bodies. This was truly rare in the world. Luo Shui was not careless. She repeatedly waved her palms and flicked her fingers, shooting out hundreds of starlight swords. Swish! 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 The hundreds of silver starlight swords carried the power to pierce through everything as they ruthlessly stabbed towards the 12 real bodies. As for the 24 illusions, Luo Shui completely ignored them. Seeing this scene, Ling Xian instantly turned pale with fright. His heart was filled with shock and horror. He simply could not believe that Luo Shui could see through his shadow strike in an instant. In his vigilance, he hurriedly withdrew his hand, wanting to dodge the attack. But it was too late to retreat. Bang! 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 The hundreds of starlight swords pierced the 10 real bodies. A series of muffled sounds rang out as blood and fire splattered all over the sky. Only 2 of the real bodies managed to retreat in time and luckily escaped this calamity. Even so, Ling Xian was still sent flying 30 li away, his body covered in blood as he smashed into the ruins. His and Batuo's injuries were even more severe, and they looked even more miserable. But the 2 of them gritted their teeth and desperately held on. The 2 of them consecutively used several sage artifacts and various secret techniques to entangle with Luo Shui. Rumble. Loud explosions rang out continuously in the sky, reverberating endlessly. Various colors of magical power splendor, blood and fire enveloped hundreds of li of heaven and earth. It was extremely chaotic. This battle lasted for a full hour, and it still didn't end. Of course, Luo Shui's clone still had the upper hand despite fighting 2 enemies alone. Even if she was only a clone and only had 20% of the original strength. But she was the clone of the martial god. She was proficient in various divine arts and secret techniques. Her rich battle experience and deep understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth were far beyond the 2 great demon saints. The 2 of them exchanged thousands of blows, and she rarely suffered any setbacks. She was able to counter and neutralize the various secret techniques of the 2 great demon saints. And the divine Tao secret techniques she used were often able to beat the 2 great demon saints until they were covered in wounds and suffering unbearable pain. Ba Tuo was the weakest, and his injuries were also the most severe. At the end of the battle, he was the first to give up. His body collapsed on the spot, turning into a bloody mist. Only a dark purple soul was left, floating in the sky, fleeing towards the divine mountain in a panic. Great Demon Saint! Forgive me for not being able to accompany you any longer. We are not this crazy woman's match at all. I can only ask the progenitor to come out of seclusion. Ba Tuo transmitted his voice to the great demon saint as he fled towards the beaming palace at the peak of the divine mountain. The great demon saint's injuries were also very severe. His body was already distorted, like a mess of meat, and could collapse at any time. But he was using the shadow race's secret technique to support himself, trying his best to prevent his body from being destroyed. He still wanted to entangle Luo Shui's clone. Luo Shui Heavenly Divine Tao. Heavenly Sword. At this moment, Luo Shui's clone waved her hands and made a hand seal, using her Divine Tao secret technique, Luo Shui Heavenly Divine Tao. A holy giant sword that was thousands of feet tall and glowing with blue light fell from the sky. Nothing in the world could hide its sharpness or stop its power. The terrifying sword intent was enough to destroy everything. Bam! The great demon saint did not even have the chance to dodge. He was hit by the heavenly sword, and his body exploded into a bloody mist that scattered in all directions. Chapter 2053. That strange divine soul was the great demon saint's divine soul. Luo Shui's eyes were sharp as he stared at the lump of spirit, as he coldly shouted. Ling Xian. Today is the day of your death. Don't even think about escaping. Pay with your life for Luo Li. With a cold shout, Luo Shui raised his foot and crossed 50 miles in a single step, catching up to the great devil saint's soul. Sword of Heaven's Wrath. She raised her right hand and used the Luo Shui's heavenly god Tao to summon the power of the stars and slashed out. A giant silver star sword that was thousands of feet tall slashed down from the sky and went straight for the great demon saint's divine soul. Before the giant sword arrived, the great demon saint's divine soul was locked down and had nowhere to run. In the next moment, his divine soul was about to be hit by the giant sword and die on the spot. However, at this critical moment, a blood-red dragon that was thousands of feet long flew out from behind the sacred mountain. Roar! The ferocious blood-red dragon raised its head and let out a dragon roar that was filled with murderous intent. It rushed into the sky as fast as an aurora to meet the starry giant sword head-on. Bang! With a deafening sound, the blood-red dragon collided with the giant star sword. Both of them collapsed at the same time and exploded into fragments that covered the sky. The blood-red fragments were like flames and the silver fragments were like starlight. The dark sky within a few hundred miles was illuminated in a dazzling light. A violent shockwave swept across the surrounding 1,000 miles of the sacred mountain and stirred up a hurricane. The towering sacred mountain that was thousands of feet tall was also shaken by the shockwave and let out a loud rumbling sound. The great demon saint and Matuo's divine souls were swept up by the shockwave and smashed into the sacred mountain. Their divine souls were hit and their consciousness became blurry. However, they were already overjoyed to be able to escape from Luo Shui's sword. Primogenitor. Primogenitor saved me. This is great. Primogenitor has finally come out of seclusion. We're saved. The two divine souls floated in the sky above the sacred mountain and looked at the dark sky behind the mountain as they shouted excitedly. Luo Shui also temporarily stopped his pursuit. He stood in the sky with a cold expression, frowning as he looked at the peak of the divine mountain. Ancestral devil god. Was it going to come out of seclusion? I wonder what realm this demon has recovered to. In the next moment, the dark sky behind the sacred mountain suddenly lit up with a bloody light. A gigantic figure slowly rose from the darkness. Boom! Roar! As that incomparably huge figure continued to rise into the sky, a series of loud noises could be heard from behind the divine mountain. All of a sudden, boundless demonic chi erupted, covering a radius of a few thousand miles. This expanse of the heavens and the earth had become pitch black, and it had completely turned into a ghastly and terrifying ghost town. Sensing the powerful aura, Luo Shui stared at the towering figure as a tinge of fear flashed across his eyes. That incomparably huge figure was over 10,000 meters tall. It was as majestic as a sacred mountain. Its entire body was black and red, and its body was towering and sturdy like an old bear. It also looked like a pitch-black bull demon. Its broad body was like a huge mountain, and its 3 heads reached into the dark clouds, revealing 6 pairs of demonic eyes that flickered with purple light. It had 6 pairs of blade-like wings on its back. They were half black and half red, and they were surrounded by demonic chi. 4 thick and sturdy mountain-like arms seemed to be able to break through the stars. This was the ancestral devil god's body. However, Luo Shui could vaguely sense that this was not the ancestral devil god's original appearance. She felt that something was amiss. The ancestral devil god seemed to have mastered some kind of secret technique, and its power was in an extremely violent state, and it could erupt at any time. At this moment, the ancestral devil god looked down at Luo Shui's clone and spoke with a booming voice. This god has been silent for too long. The people of the world have already forgotten the name, Death God, and have abandoned fear and reverence. Now, even a mere Valkyrie dares to barge into the northern underworld mountain and make an enemy out of this god. Furthermore, this is not the Valkyrie's true body, but just a clone. You are looking down on this god. The ancestral devil god's voice was deep and vigorous, as if he was talking to himself. However, it contained a formless power that directly attacked one's soul. As he spoke, the sky and earth within a radius of a few thousand miles undulated along with his aura. Clearly, he had already merged with the heavens and earth within a few thousand miles. Luo Shui's clone stared at him coldly, and said in an icy tone, "Ancestral devil god? Death god? A demon that fell 30,000 years ago. It is already a great fortune that you can be reborn today. If I were you, I would find a place to hibernate, and focus on recovering my strength. I would definitely not send out an army to start a war before I have recovered my strength, and bring about a fatal disaster." Hearing this, the ancestral devil god's 6 demonic eyes flickered with a sharp, cold light as they stared at Luo Shui's clone. "Oh. Little girl, you know quite a lot about this god's past. You are the divine master of Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, Luo Shui Martial God. When Ji Tianqing was in Luo Shui Divine Kingdom, he received quite a bit of your protection, right?" Luo Shui's clone was unwilling to talk about this topic, and said in a sinister tone, "Devil God, you should feel lucky that only this god's clone has come today. If this god had come personally, you and Baiming Palace would have been annihilated. However, this god has come this time to avenge Luo Li. As long as you hand over the great demon saint's divine soul, I can let you live." The ancestral devil god sneered, and said in a mocking tone, "Ha ha 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 ha. You. Let this god off the hook. What a joke. 30,000 years ago, all the gods in the world trembled in fear when they heard this god's name. Little girl, you don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, you are truly arrogant and ignorant to the extreme. What kind of place do you think Baiming Mountain is? If you really had the ability, you would have flattened Baiming Mountain long ago. Why did you have to endure until now? Furthermore, this god has achieved great success in cultivating the heaven-piercing giant demon physique, and my vitality has recovered by more than half. Since you have taken the initiative to send yourself to death, this god will fulfill your wish." As his voice fell, the ancestral devil god waved his 4 mountain-like arms, and smashed out fist shadows that blotted out the sky towards Luo Shui's clone. Over 100 fist shadows were blood-red, dark purple, and pitch-black. They contained a monstrous demonic power, and their might was terrifying. Luo Shui immediately sensed that the ancestral devil god's aura was several times stronger than the great demon saint's. It was already comparable to a true martial god expert. She did not dare to be careless, and with a solemn expression, she waved her palm to cast a spell. Her slender fingers scattered starlight that filled the sky, and welcomed the 100-fist shadows. The specks of silver light formed tens of thousands of starlight swords, forming a huge sword array. Bang 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 bang. The sword array and fist shadows fiercely collided, and an earth-shattering sound erupted, fiercely reverberating between heaven and earth. Very quickly, the starlight swords and fist shadows collapsed. After exchanging a move, both sides were evenly matched, and no one was able to gain an advantage. Chapter 2054. Massacre. The ancestor fiend celestial roared furiously as he waved his 4 gigantic palms, which blotted out the sky, towards the Luo Shui clone. The gigantic palms were like blades, emitting bloody and purple light. They were like blades that could cut open the sky, destroying everything. The ancestor fiend celestial's secret techniques all had simple names, but their power was extremely terrifying. This was because he was once the ancestor of the fiend celestial race that controlled the 5 elements world. His martial path had already reached perfection, and he had already abandoned his flashy techniques, reaching the realm of the great Tao is the most simple. The bloody blades from the 4 gigantic palms were enough to slaughter all living things. The Luo Shui clone did not dare to underestimate the enemy. He waved his 10 fingers, shooting out hundreds of icy blue water pillars. Virtuous like water, you can do anything you want. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Every water pillar was 5 kilometers long, like icy blue ribbons, as they danced in the sky. The hundreds of water pillars intertwined, forming a gigantic net that blotted out the sky, covering a radius of dozens of kilometers. The ancestor fiend celestial's attack was extremely domineering and violent. As for the water-type divine power, it was extremely gentle and endless. The 4 gigantic palms that could split the sky and earth struck the icy blue net, creating a world-shaking sound as icy blue water splashed everywhere. The icy blue net was split open, and the 200 water pillars were severed, causing a torrential flood to fall. However, the ancestor fiend celestial's attack was blocked by the icy blue net, losing all its power. No one could do anything to the other, and it was a tie again. The ancestor fiend celestial roared furiously as he waved his 4 arms again, flapping his 6 pairs of wings, releasing an attack that blotted out the sky. Various spells condensed from bloody and purple light rained down, covering a radius of a few hundred kilometers. The world was in complete chaos, and nothing could be seen. Luo Shui could only defend with all her might, using various defensive techniques to neutralize the ancestor fiend celestial's attack. She was a water-type martial god, and was known as the god of Luo Shui. Defense-type secret techniques and ultimate skills were her forte. In 2 hours, the ancestor fiend celestial attacked with more than 3,000 moves, sparing no effort. However, Luo Shui blocked and neutralized 90% of the attacks. The remaining 10% of the spells that hit her did not cause too much damage, only slightly injuring her. Previously, I fought with Ling Xian and Ba Tuo for quite a long time, and used up a lot of my magic power. Now, the ancestor fiend celestial is attacking with all his might. I can only defend and neutralize his attacks. Fierce attacks like this consumes a lot of his energy. I've already been fighting with it for half an hour. I believe that it won't be long before its strength is exhausted. At that time, I will have a chance to defeat it and kill Great Devil Saint Ling Xian. Luo Shui. As the Luo Shui clone fought Fiend Celestial, she was the Fiend Celestial, and was the Fiend Celestial, was the Fiend God. Now, Luo Fai. 2 hours passed. She exchanged another few thousand moves with the ancestral fiend god, and the battle was extremely intense. The sky, the sky, and sun, and was the sun was sun, and the sun, Louis. Everything within a radius of 800 miles around the sacred mountain had turned into scorched earth and ruins. The wastelands, craters, mountain ranges and peaks were all reduced to dust. Even half of the 10,000-meter-tall divine mountain had collapsed, and a great amount of earth and rocks had collapsed. If not for the ancestor fiend celestial protecting the Loyalos, the 10,000-meter-tall peak would have been reduced to dust. After 2 hours of intense fighting, Luo Shui's clone's injuries were even more severe. Her body was covered in blood, and one of her arms had been cut off. Her strength was greatly weakened. On the other hand, the ancestor fiend celestial was still full of power, and showed no signs of exhaustion. He had already gained the upper hand and was in complete control of the situation. He used a barrage of attacks to suppress Luo Shui's clone, preventing her from counterattacking or escaping. Luo Shui's clone realized that she was not the ancestor fiend celestial's match. If she continued fighting, she would only die. After all, the ancestor fiend celestial had recovered a lot of his strength, and he had the geographical advantage. If she left North Underworld Mountain, she might have a chance to fight the ancestor fiend celestial for 3,000 rounds, and win. But now, the ancestor fiend celestial was at the peak of the Loyalos, with the Blood Sea Abyss behind him, and his strength had greatly increased. With the Blood Sea Abyss providing him with power, he had an endless supply of it. In the Loyalos and the Blood Sea Abyss, the ancestor fiend celestial was invincible. Unless Luo Shui martial god's true body came, there was no chance of victory. No, I can't continue fighting with the ancestor fiend celestial, or I will die here. Although this is only my clone, it was forged from my soul and blood essence. It took me 9 years to complete, and I also used 6 divine-grade materials. However, I have come to avenge Luo Li. Even if I want to leave, I have to kill the great fiend celestial Ling Xian first. Luo Shui's clone made up her mind. As she fought with the ancestor fiend celestial, she searched for Ling Xian's whereabouts. Soon, her divine sense found that Ling Xian's soul had hidden in North Underworld Palace. The North Underworld Palace at the peak of the mountain was extremely solemn and dignified, and it had even set up a powerful defensive sacred array. After exchanging 2 blows with the ancestor fiend celestial, Luo Shui's clone took the opportunity to escape from the ancestor fiend celestial's clutches, and rushed to the peak of the Loyalos. Whoosh! She turned into an icy blue stream of light and formed a huge sword, thrusting towards North Underworld Palace. Inside North Underworld Palace, Ling Xian was hiding in a heavily guarded secret room, treating his injuries with all his might. As the huge sword thrusted down, a formless icy aura enveloped the peak of the mountain. Ling Xian sensed it and knew that a calamity was about to befall him. He was immediately shocked and furious, and hurriedly burrowed into the ground, trying to hide. At the same time, the ancestor fiend celestial standing behind the Loyalos sneered in a mocking tone. Ha ha ha! Luo Shui, you have finally taken the bait. As he spoke, the ancestor fiend celestial quickly waved his 4 arms, sending out a blood light that covered the sky. Extermination of all life. Following the ancestor fiend celestial's cold shout, the dark sky around North Underworld Palace suddenly lit up with a soaring blood light. In the blink of an eye, a super-large array with a radius of 500 miles rapidly appeared. This light barrier that covered the sky was dark purple, and it flickered with hundreds of blood dragon shadows, as well as thousands of Asuras and evil demons phantoms. Kill! The ancestor fiend celestial waved his 4 arms and controlled the power of the large array, ruthlessly suppressing Luo Shui's clone. A formless power that could destroy the world attacked from all directions, immediately enveloping the huge icy blue sword. Ka-cha! With a crisp explosion, the huge icy blue sword crumbled on the spot, shattering into pieces that filled the sky. Luo Shui's clone appeared, covered in blood as she fell to the ground, heavily crashing into the square in front of North Underworld Palace. A deep pit was created in the square that was paved with solid black stones, with countless pieces of stone flying everywhere. Her body was bent over in the pit, as she tried her best to raise her head to look at the sky, dark red blood gushing out of her mouth and nose. Chapter 2055. Luo Shui's clone was already heavily injured. Now that she was imprisoned by the life extermination array, her injuries were even more severe and she was at the end of her tether. She glared at the ancestor fiend celestial, her eyes filled with hatred and killing intent. The ancestor fiend celestial looked down at her from above and sneered, "Luo Shui, don't blame me for being despicable. You are just too stupid and too impulsive. This sacred mountain is the sacred land of my clan, and Baiming Palace is my resting place. How can I not set up a powerful array? For 30,000 years, my clan has been living in seclusion in Baiming Mountain, recuperating. Even if the divine martial continent's various races and divine kingdoms change, it will not affect my clan. Do you know why? My clan has been living in seclusion, this is one of the reasons. But most importantly, it is because Baiming Mountain's terrain is treacherous and the environment is vile. Every step is filled with danger and danger. Especially around the sacred mountain and the sacred city, we have set up an inescapable net. Even a martial sage would have to return in defeat. The ancestor fiend celestial looked as if victory was already in his hands, his eyes filled with pride. He was not in a hurry to kill Luo Shui's clone, but said slowly, "Previously, you destroyed the sacred city and killed your way to the sacred mountain. You are truly awe-inspiring and invincible. I don't want to activate the sacred array. It can't stop you at all and will only be a waste of time. Only the divine array on the sacred mountain can trap you and kill you." There was no doubt that the great formation of annihilation was a genuine divine formation. And it was an ancient demonic array that had once killed the various races' divine spirits. When Luo Shui's clone heard this, she was even more enraged and her killing intent surged. She glared at the ancestor fiend celestial and said in a sinister tone, "No wonder you have been hiding on the sacred mountain and never showed yourself. It turns out that you are relying on the protection of the divine array and the power of the blood sea abyss to recover your vitality. But don't be too proud. I have already figured out Baiming Mountain's situation. Today, I have lost this clone. When my true body arrives, I will definitely flatten Baiming Palace." After saying that, she slowly stood up and walked towards the sky with her back ramrod straight. Ancestral devil god looked down at her and sneered, "That's right, you are the famous Luo Shui martial god. If you were here in your true form, I wouldn't be a match for you. However, in the next few decades, you won't come out of seclusion at all. Otherwise, your years of bitter cultivation will be wasted." In order to avenge his maid, not only did he have to destroy a clone, he even had to destroy hundreds of years of cultivation. What a joke! The Luo Shui clone said expressionlessly, "Cut the crap. Do you really think that you can easily kill me with this divine formation? How laughable! Your true strength is only at the peak of the martial sage realm. You are still far from the deity realm. Even if I have to abandon this clone today, I won't let you off easily." With that, the Luo Shui clone clasped his hands together in front of his chest and closed his eyes with a solemn expression. He began to circulate his magic power and use his final trump card. Star Fall. Her entire body lit up with an ice-blue brilliance that soared into the sky. She was burning with a fierce silver star fire, and her body swelled up violently. Without a doubt, the Luo water clone was about to self-destruct. The ancestral fiend celestial's expression immediately changed. His 6 eyes were filled with deep fear and wariness. He hurriedly waved his 6 arms and absorbed the power of the blood sea abyss. He frantically poured it into the divine formation, desperately suppressing the Luo Shui clone. He could only try to resist and neutralize it. He could not escape. Otherwise, the self-destruction of the Luo Shui clone would definitely destroy the entire divine mountain and Baiming Palace. At the same time, the many demonic Dao experts in Baiming Palace, as well as the souls of Ling Xian and Batua, all entered the divine artifact and fled the divine formation as if their lives depended on it. They all fled towards the blood sea abyss in a panic, seeking the protection of the ancestral fiend celestial. The next moment, the Luo Shui clone transformed into a resplendent full moon, releasing the most dazzling brilliance in the sky. Boom! An earth-shaking explosion shook the universe. The momentum was terrifying to the extreme. Endless star fire and ice-blue brilliance rose up like a mushroom cloud, illuminating the surrounding thousands of kilometers as if it was daytime. Even the divine formation of annihilation of the world could not withstand the terrifying might of the self-destruction. The massive barrier of light of the formation crumbled with cracking sounds, numerous cracks appearing on it. Within the formation, more than half of Beiming Palace at the peak of the divine mountain had been destroyed. Many of the palaces, pavilions and walls had been reduced to rubble, leaving behind countless bricks and broken walls. The peak of the mountain was a mess. The entire divine mountain shook violently, several ravines appearing on it. It had almost collapsed. Several hundred demonic Tao experts that could not escape in time were all killed on the spot, blown to smithereens. Even the ancestral fiend celestial that controlled the divine formation swayed from the impact. Cracks appeared on his chest and neck, causing a rain of blood to rain down. The intense pain caused him to roar at the sky. He was so furious that he almost went mad. The self-destruction of the Luo Shui clone had destroyed the divine formation. The ancestral fiend celestial had used his heart's blood, demonic creatures and talismans to set up this divine formation. The divine formation was connected to his soul. Now that the divine formation had been destroyed, he obviously suffered a backlash. Not only was his body heavily injured, his soul was also severely damaged. After a long while, the earth-shaking explosions gradually dissipated. The dust and starlight that filled the world also gradually disappeared. Everything was over. The world calmed down. Everything within a radius of 1,000 miles had been reduced to rubble. It was a scene of devastation and dust. The divine mountain that was covered in cracks stood alone among the rubble. The peak of the divine mountain was also in ruins. The ground was a mess. The ancestral fiend celestial stood in the sky, looking down at this scene. He was furious and pained. Saint Devil City had been destroyed. Over 2 million demonic Tao citizens had been killed. Countless elite experts had been killed, even the divine mountain had been destroyed. More than half of Beiming Palace had been destroyed. Such heavy losses were a huge blow to the demonic Tao. It would take many years for them to recover their strength. After a long while, Ling Xian and Batuo's souls flew out of the blood sea abyss and landed beside the ancestral fiend celestial. The two of them had survived the calamity. They secretly rejoiced, but they still had lingering fears. Ancestral fiend celestial, this subordinate has failed. Ancestral fiend celestial, please punish me. Ancestral fiend celestial, this subordinate was unable to stop that crazy woman. The ancestral fiend celestial endured his injuries and said in a dignified tone, Luo Shui has personally sent her avatar for revenge. You are not her match. It is normal for you to be defeated. Fortunately, her avatar has been destroyed. Her main body will also be implicated. She will not come for revenge in the short term. Quickly gather the chiefs and leaders of the various large tribes and arrange for the rebuilding of the divine mountain and the reconstruction of the divine holy city. This god had a huge battle and has greatly damaged my vitality. I still need to recuperate for a few years. I cannot be disturbed. Ling Xian and Batuo's souls hurriedly complied. After hesitating for a while, Batuo carefully asked, Ancestral Fiend Celestial, this subordinate and great demon sage's bodies have been destroyed. I'm afraid it will take 100 years, the Ancestral Fiend Celestial said in a low voice. After you have arranged for the reconstruction, enter the Blood Sea Abyss. This god will personally heal your injuries and help you recover your avatars. Chapter 2056. For the sake of convenience, the great demon saint and Batuo's divine soul temporarily resided in two demonic objects. One transformed into a black robe and demonic fog, while the other resided in a demonic sword and appeared as a phantom. The two of them informed the various major tribes and gathered 8 demon monarchs, 6 tribal chiefs, and hundreds of thousands of demon soldiers. Under the arrangement of the 2 demon saints, the demon monarchs and tribal chiefs led the soldiers to rebuild Saint Devil City. Even the damaged Sacred Mountain and Beiming Palace were being repaired day and night. According to everyone's estimation, it would take at least 3 months to complete the reconstruction of Saint Devil City. On the other hand, the Sacred Mountain and Beiming Palace only needed 2 months to be repaired. Of course, after this disaster, the demon race's vitality was greatly damaged, and their strength was not as strong as before. Especially with the destruction of Saint Devil City, the damage to the Sacred Mountain and Beiming Palace, it was a huge blow to the demon race's morale. Even if Saint Devil City was rebuilt, it would take many years for it to return to its former glory. After arranging all the matters, the 2 demon saints entered the Blood Sea Abyss to receive the ancestral fiend god's secret treatment. To the ancestral fiend god, the most precious thing was time. If the 2 demon saints were to enter seclusion to recover, it would take at least 100 years. It could not wait that long. Therefore, it would use the ancient demon's secret technique to refine the great demon saint and Batua into puppets, just like how it treated the Azura demon saint. In this way, the great demon saint and Batuo's future would be destroyed, and they would never be able to break through to the god realm. But the ancestral fiend god did not care, it only needed to buy time. In a short 10 years, it would be able to recover to the god realm and dominate the world. As for the life and death of the demon saints and their future, it was not within its consideration. Unknowingly, 10 days passed in a flash. Ji Tianqing had been staying in the Luotian mountain, cultivating in seclusion in the Cloud Water Palace's secret chamber. His strength had already reached the peak of the 8th stage of the tribulation passing realm, and he could sense the arrival of the heavenly tribulation. These 10 days of closed-door cultivation had made his martial arts foundation even more solid. He also had greater confidence in facing the unknown heavenly tribulation. On the morning of the 11th day, he finally ended his cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. Just as he walked out of the Cloud Water Palace, he saw a few guards and maids gathered together, whispering. The guards and maids were chatting passionately, and their emotions were also quite excited. "Hey, have you guys heard? Our Divine Master caused a ruckus in the North Underworld Mountain." "Of course I've heard about it. This news came from the North Underworld Mountain, and it has already spread throughout the 3 divine kingdoms, right?" "Exactly. The Divine Master only used an avatar to destroy the Saint Devil City and Sacred Mountain of the demon race. He even destroyed the Beiming Palace. This is shocking news." "That's right. Who do you think our Divine Master is? Just by sending an avatar into North Underworld Mountain, the devil race will suffer heavy casualties and wails everywhere. If that happens, the war situation in the north will also be affected. The aggressive demons will definitely suffer great losses and their morale will plummet. Yes. The Divine Master's method is too satisfying. I'm just puzzled. Why doesn't the Divine Master personally enter the North Underworld Mountain? He would definitely be able to annihilate the entire demon race in one fell swoop." "Sigh, I used to think so too, but the Lord God is a deity. How can we, mere mortals, guess her thoughts?" The guards and maids were chatting enthusiastically and did not notice Ji Tianqing's approach. Until the golden dragon suddenly appeared and stared at everyone with a solemn expression. Only then did the few guards and maids hurriedly shut their mouths and disperse like birds and beasts. The golden dragon walked quickly to Ji Tianqing and bowed, "Subordinate greets young master." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked, "Golden dragon, what happened?" From what they said, it seems that the Luoshui martial god sent an avatar to cause a ruckus in the North Underworld Mountain. The golden dragon did not dare to conceal anything and answered truthfully, "Young master, that's right. After divine official Luoli died, the divine master was very sad. In order to avenge divine official Luo, he sent an avatar into the North Underworld Mountain and started a massacre. Not only was the Saint Devil City destroyed, more than 2 million demons lost their lives, even the sacred mountain and beaming palace of the demon race were heavily damaged. It is said that the demon race lost countless elite experts and powerhouses. Even 2 great demon saints had their avatars destroyed and almost lost their lives. The Golden Dragon's words were very pertinent and did not exaggerate at all. Ji Tianqing frowned and a strange look flashed in his eyes. He nodded silently. Okay, I know. The Golden Dragon hurriedly bowed and changed the topic, asking, Young Master, I heard from Master that your heavenly tribulation is near. Why did you come out instead of cultivating in the secret room? Ji Tianqing smiled and said indifferently, the heavenly tribulation will descend today. Hearing this, the Golden Dragon's expression changed and he hurriedly bowed, Please don't blame me, young master. I will go and prepare to clear the place. I wish young master a smooth heavenly tribulation. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said indifferently, No need to clear the place. If everyone wants to see me pass the heavenly tribulation, then let them. After saying this, he stepped out of the Cloud Water Palace and walked toward the solitary cloud peak at the back of the mountain. The morning sun had just risen and the steep solitary cloud peak stood alone in the back of the mountain. Ji Tianqing walked through the buildings and palaces and crossed the square. He walked leisurely toward the solitary cloud peak, attracting the attention of countless people. Many disciples of the Luotian mountain were surprised and curious when they saw him suddenly appear. Seeing him go to the solitary cloud peak, everyone guessed something and hurriedly followed to see what was going on. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing arrived at the solitary cloud peak. He sat cross-legged on the mountain peak and closed his eyes to adjust his breathing, merging with the heaven and earth. Gray clouds quickly gathered in the sky in all directions, and a violent hurricane started to blow. The wind and clouds met and the sky immediately darkened, blocking the morning sun. Such a change in heaven and earth naturally attracted the attention of countless people. When the disciples, guards, and maids saw the change in the sky, they immediately cried out in alarm. Heavens! The heavenly tribulation is about to descend. Which senior brother or senior sister is going through the heavenly tribulation? This heavenly anomaly is very unusual. I just heard that young Master Ji is back. He is on the solitary cloud peak. What? Eldest senior brother is back. He is going to pass the heavenly tribulation. Oh my God! It has only been 2.5 years since eldest senior brother went through the heavenly tribulation. He is going to go through the heavenly tribulation again. It's too scary. As expected of eldest senior brother. As expected of the number 1 genius of the kingdom of gods. What are you all waiting for? Let's go to the solitary cloud peak to see what is going on. Eldest senior brother and senior sister have always been benevolent and will not stop us. We can watch them go through the heavenly tribulation. In the various palaces of the Luotian mountain, similar discussions constantly sounded. Countless young disciples, guards, and maids rushed to the solitary cloud peak to watch Ji Tianqing go through the heavenly tribulation. At the same time, Ji Tianqing looked up at the pitch-black sky and looked at the tribulation cloud vortex with a deep gaze. He thought to himself, the first 8 bolts of heavenly tribulation were ordinary. I wonder what kind of test the 9th bolt of heavenly tribulation will be. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.